Chapter 187. Mephisto smiled. So you're Sir Kieran, I've heard about you from Mississippi. Mr. Chi's strength is really admirable. Chi-Yu smiled and said, There's no need to admire. This trip to Greece was at Miss Yamu's invitation. If there's a chance in the future, I'll have to spend more time with the Constellation Guardians. As he said that, he turned around and looked at Yamu. At this time, Yamu's chanting had gradually dimmed, and the light on her body also continued to weaken. However, the three divine weapons that revolved around her body released an extremely strong light. If one did not look carefully, it would be easy to misunderstand that the light was released from Yamu's body. The strong energy fluctuations gave Chi-Yu a strange feeling. The Xianyuan sword in his body was trembling slightly. It was not fear, nor was it a warning, but a kind of excitement. He understood that this was because the Xianyuan sword felt the aura of Athena's three divine weapons and wanted to issue a challenge. It seemed that this was the true energy aura of Athena's three divine weapons. As expected of the divine weapons, at this time, even he could not feel the depth of the three divine weapons. Yamu's chanting stopped abruptly, and her delicate body slowly floated down from the sky. The moment her feet touched the ground, all the golden light suddenly disappeared at the same time. It turned out that the divine weapons that revolved around her body had quietly integrated into her body. The aura dimmed, and the invisible pressure also dissipated. All the Constellation Guardians seemed to heave a sigh of relief. Yamu's delicate body swayed, and her face became pale again. From her forehead, Chi-Yu saw the sweat and hurriedly took a few steps forward to help Yamu, but when he thought of the Constellation Guardians beside him, he held back. Opening her eyes, Yamu's gaze looked a lot dimmer, and her purple eyes had no luster. Even the divine aura had dissipated. Now, she looked like an ordinary beautiful girl. Of course, it was also of the highest quality. Chi-Yu could no longer sense any energy from her body. Looking at her frail appearance, he couldn't help but sigh. He couldn't help but feel a little distressed in his heart. This feeling made Chi-Yu secretly shocked. Could it be that he had developed true feelings for Yamu? Otherwise, why would he have such a feeling? No, I can't. I can't be emotional. Looking at the crowd in front of her, Yamu said indifferently, You're all here. Mississippi, all the Constellation Guardians bowed to Yamu at the same time. Chi-Yu's mental energy had been locked onto them, but he was disappointed to find that the Constellation Guardians' aura was actually filled with respect, and he could not find any flaws. Could it be that Yamu's judgment was wrong? If not, seeing that Yamu had already lost her energy, why did the Constellation Guardians' aura not change at all? Yamu sat cross-legged in front of Athena's statue, took a deep breath, and said, You should have seen it. After careful consideration, I decided to do this. Everything you did just now was also in my consciousness. Ilyas, Saso, the two of you apologized to Mr. Chi. Ilyas frowned, a cold light flashed in his eyes, but Saso gracefully walked in front of Chi-Yu, smiled charmingly, and looked at Chi-Yu seductively, and bowed. Mr. Chi, I'm really sorry just now, I was too anxious for Miss Safety, please forgive me. When she bowed, Chi-Yu saw something he should not have seen. Her small top, at most, covered less than half of her full breast. When she bowed, it immediately made Chi-Yu's eyes pop out. Coughing, Chi-Yu said, Forget it, let bygones be bygones. As long as there's no next time. I'm sorry. Ilyas's emotionless voice rang out at this time. Chi-Yu turned back to look at him, but did not say anything. Yamu said, Thank you for your concern, everyone. Everything is fine now, you can all go back. From today onwards, no one is allowed to come to Parthenon without my summons. I need to focus on my cultivation, and understand the mysteries of Athena's divine artifact. But miss, this is very dangerous. Miguelis couldn't help but say. Mephistopheles nodded and said, Yes, miss, you have now lost your own energy. As your guardian, please allow us to protect your safety here, okay? This is the most important responsibility of us Constellation Guardians. Yamu said apologetically. I'm sorry, Mephistopheles, I didn't discuss this with you before. I also made this decision at the last minute. Don't worry, this is Athens, and there are guards arranged by the government. There won't be any danger. Mephistopheles glanced at Chi-Yu and said, Those troops can only defend against ordinary people, they can't do anything to the truly strong. Miss, I think you should let us stay. This way we can better protect your safety. Chi-Yu smiled slightly and said, Don't you still have me here? It's enough with me protecting Yamu. It's precisely because of you that we have to stay, Ilias said coldly. Chi-Yu couldn't help but be amused by his words. Mr. Ilias, our Yanhuang is a country of etiquette. Do you think I will take advantage of others? If that's the case, why would Miss Yamu trust me and let me stay? Before Ilias could speak again, Yamu already said, Ilias, go and tend to your injuries. Chi-Yu is right, he is worthy of trust. Moreover, he is my fiancé now. With him here to protect me, I believe. No one can hurt me. The fat on Mephistopheles' face twitched. He looked at Yamu and said, Mississippi, can I speak to you alone for a moment? Yamu looked at Mephistopheles, her purple eyes revealing a trace of fatigue. She shook her head and said, No need, I know what you want to ask. I have already said it very clearly. Chi-Yu is my fiancé. This is my decision, and I will not change it. All right, you can leave. If you insist on staying. Just guard outside Parthenon. Mephistopheles looked deeply at Yamu, and Yamu was also looking at him. Their gazes met and seemed to communicate something. He nodded and said, All right then. We will guard Miss Safety outside. As he spoke, he walked to the position of the Libra constellation on the Zodiac. The signs of the Zodiac constellation stood, and a golden aura emanated. Under Chi-Yu's shocked gaze, a golden light suddenly rose and then a huge square box floated out. Chi-Yu had seen it before. Only now did he know. So the constellation of the Zodiac Guardians was actually in Parthenon. Miss, if we are guarding outside, then shouldn't he go outside too? Soso asked tentatively. Chi-Yu asked in return, Why should I go out too? Didn't you hear what Yamu said, I am her fiancé? Sova glanced at Chi-Yu and said, However, the young miss has not officially married you, right? Yamu looked at the gazes of the Zodiac Guardians and nodded. Chi-Yu, sorry to trouble you. Please go outside too. I am sorry, you have just arrived in Athens, and I will have to trouble you. When my body recovers tomorrow, I will accompany you to look around Athens, okay? Looking at Yamu's pleading eyes, Chi-Yu nodded helplessly and said, All right then. He did not insist, because he could understand Yamu's difficulties. After all, she was a virgin goddess. If he really stayed here, it would affect her reputation among the Zodiac Guardians. So be it. Wasn't there still a duel waiting for him? All the Zodiac Guardians took out their own boxes like Mephisto did, and carried them on their backs as they walked out of the door. Chi-Yu was the last to walk out of Parthenon. Before he left, he told Yamu that he would use his spiritual force to lock on the entire Parthenon, and no matter what happened, he would be able to react quickly. It was already late at night when he walked out of Parthenon. The air quality in Athens was very average, and was not much better than the Yanhuang Republic's capital. All the Zodiac Guardians were gathered at the door. There were 11 of them, and 22 pairs of eyes were all focused on Chi-Yu. I request for you to annul the marriage with Mississippi. Ilias looked at Chi-Yu. His lion-like roar directly rang in Chi-Yu's ears. Chi-Yu snorted and said, You think I'll annul it just because you say so? Don't tell me you haven't had enough from just now? Ilias said angrily, I want to duel with you. Chi-Yu said in disdain, Forget it. I will not duel with someone like you. Ilias, don't tell me you have some thoughts about Yamu. Otherwise, if Yamu wants to marry someone, why are you so agitated? You. When it came to bickering, how could Ilias be a match for the ruffian Chi-Yu? Just as he was about to rush forward, he was stopped by Mephisto. Ilias, no matter what, Mr. Chi is Miss Guest, don't be rude. Although Ilya's attitude towards Soso was very bad, when he heard Mephisto's voice, he actually became a lot more well-behaved. He suppressed his anger and slowly took a few steps back. Mephisto said, "You're injured, Salen, bring him to the hospital for a checkup, then come back, we'll be here." Salen nodded and said, "I will. Let's go." The last two words were said to Ilyas. Chi-Yu did not look at Ilyas anymore, but turned his gaze to Miero. "How is it, Constellation Guardian of Scorpio, should we start?" Miero looked at Chi-Yu indifferently and said, "Okay." One-word answer, very simple. And the aura on his body immediately changed at this moment. He was not like the other Constellation Guardians who released the golden light when they activated the energy in their body, but only his right arm changed. A faint golden light gradually emitted from his right arm, and the sleeve of his right arm suddenly broke like a butterfly, revealing a solid arm. Miero's right arm was very special, the skin actually shone with a metallic luster, and his palm was like a blade. Looking at Chi-Yu, his gaze was also like a sharp blade, the aura on his body constantly rose, and the place where this aura gathered was his right arm. Chi-Yu looked at him with some surprise and said, "Your ability can't be the Holy Sword, right? Like that cartoon from the Sun Nation?" Miero frowned slightly and said, "Whether it's the same or not, you'll know after you try." Chi-Yu smiled indifferently and said, "All right, since you use your right arm, then I'll also use my right arm. Let's have a competition and see whose arm is stronger." Miero's right arm that shone with a metallic luster ignited Chi-Yu's competitive spirit. He had absolute reason to believe that Kirin's arm was definitely not inferior to anyone who was good at arm abilities. Similarly extending his right arm, Chi-Yu took a deep breath. The energy on Kirin's arm was completely restrained, and only a silver light slowly revolved around his right arm. Miero looked at Chi-Yu indifferently. "My ability is not called the Holy Sword, but the Azura Blade. Azura means devil, and my Azura Blade exists only to kill devils. I will not show mercy when I attack, you be careful." Azura Blade, it sounded like a good name. Chi-Yu looked at Miero, and smiled slightly, and said, "Come." The other Constellation Guardians spread out to the sides. Under Mephisto's command, they did not stay to watch the battle, but surrounded Parthenon, and went to different parts of the temple to guard. Chi-Yu was not worried about these people, because his spiritual power was always paying attention to the movements of these Constellation Guardians. He was not afraid of them playing any trick. Miero scowled. His right arm, which had been restraining his aura, suddenly erupted with a tyrannical aura. The incomparably sharp energy was actually somewhat similar to the Xianyuan sword. However, the energy that erupted from his Shura blade did not have the Xianyuan sword's king's chi. Instead, it had a more tragic aura and surging killing intent. Needless to say, this guy was definitely an executioner. Mephisto retreated 100 meters away, quietly watching the two of them. He was the only one watching this battle. "Wait a minute." Just as Miero was about to attack, Chi-Yu suddenly spoke. Hearing his voice, Miero, who was ready to attack, had to forcibly stop. An extremely uncomfortable feeling filled his chest, and said angrily, "What are you doing?" Chi-Yu said apologetically, "I'm really sorry, it's not easy to make money these days. I'm afraid that I will damage my clothes when I fight, so it's better for me to take it off first." As he spoke, he took off his shirt, as if there was no one else around, and put it into the Kirin pearl, revealing his burly upper body. When Chi-Yu took off his shirt, Miero could no longer be bothered to blame him, because he and Mephisto, who was watching from the side, were attracted by the Kirin pattern on Chi-Yu's body. Under the stimulation of the thundercloud force, Ink Kirin seemed to come to life, stepping on a four-colored auspicious cloud, exuding a bright luster, especially its silver hair, which was exceptionally clear in the darkness. Chi-Yu smiled and moved his body. "We can start this time." Silver light constantly surged from the Kirin pattern to his right arm, and as the black and silver light intertwined, Chi-Yu's aura suddenly became different. It did not have the sharpness that Miero expected, but an extremely domineering aura suddenly appeared. Chi-Yu's entire right arm seemed to expand a little, but it seemed to be an illusion caused by energy. There was one thing that Miero was sure of, and that was the domineering energy of Chi-Yu. Your energy was not like this just now. What I want to fight is the ability that injured Ilya's. Are you looking down on me? Miero's pupils shrank a little. Chi-Yu shook his head and said, No, of course I'm not looking down on you. It's just that I used a weapon to injure Miero, and you are now barehanded. How can I use a weapon? Come on, if you can win my Kirin arm, I will naturally use a weapon. The silver light dyed Kirin's arm brighter and brighter. A domineering energy aura condensed within it. The Kirin bead on Chi-Yu's chest lit up, and the four-colored thundercloud force kept moving rhythmically, but at this time, they were transforming into the purest Kirin energy. Miero made the first move. His speed was one of the fastest Chi-Yu had ever seen. In a flash, Miero had already made his move. In just a flash, he had already cut in front of Chi-Yu. His palm was like a blade, and he directly slashed down towards Chi-Yu. The sharp and fierce aura made Chi-Yu feel as though he was on the battlefield. That domineering energy actually had a speed similar to lightning. In just a moment, the golden blade aura had already reached the top of his head. The color of Miero's energy was slightly different from the other constellation guardians. From the edge of his palm all the way to his right arm, the light aura was green-gold. It was a faint cold light and it was terrifying. It carried a mournful sound. As though it came from hell, the air had already been split open. A feeling of suffocation was produced from the sharpness, causing Chi-Yu to have difficulty breathing. Chi-Yu's combat experience was extremely rich. Facing Miero's attack, he did not have the slightest bit of hesitation. At the same time, he did not dodge because he wanted to give it a try. Exactly how strong was Miero's Azura blade? Similarly, his palm was like a blade. Following Chi-Yu's shout, he welcomed the attack. Lin. The silver light aura pervaded. Kirin's arm did not have the sharpness of the Azura blade, but it had Chi-Yu's huge and domineering energy. It was almost crazy. The energy instantly increased. With a loud bang, the silver and green-gold colors had already collided above Chi-Yu's head. The ear-piercing sound of friction caused one's teeth to ache. Both of their bodies passed each other. The tyranny of Kirin's arm caused Miero's body to stagger back 7 to 8 steps before he could stabilize himself, and Chi-Yu's right palm also produced a burning sensation. The sharpness of the Azura blade was indeed extraordinary. After exchanging one move, Chi-Yu already had some understanding of his opponent's abilities. The Azura blade was actually condensing all of Miero's energy at the edge of his palm and right arm, forming a sharp blade of energy. Such an attack could produce an extremely strong destructive force, and this method of condensing energy, even Chi-Yu could not help but be interested. One must know, this method of condensing energy into a blade was something that even he could not do as Miero did. Chi-Yu was surprised. Miero and Mephisto were even more surprised. Others might not know, but Mephisto was very clear on how strong Miero was. Amongst all the constellation guardians, if one only talked about close combat, then Miero was definitely number one. His close combat ability was mainly displayed in the Azura blade. That incomparably sharp energy could be condensed in an instant, and the destructive force was extremely shocking. Mephisto had personally seen Miero attack with his bare hands, and cut through the 7 layers of titanium alloy. But, facing Chi-Yu, who was also using his bare hands, not only did he not gain the upper hand, but he was also repelled by Chi-Yu's energy. It was the first time Mephisto had seen such a situation. He admitted that he could not do what Chi-Yu did. Even if he wanted to win against Miero, he had to rely on his own special ability. Miero's Azura blade attracted Chi-Yu's interest, and changed his tactics. To be able to gain a deeper understanding of the Azura blade's mysteries, Chi-Yu decided not to fight head-on with his opponent. With a smile, Chi-Yu put his hands behind his back, turned around, and landed 20 meters in front of Miero. Miero was slightly out of breath. As the saying goes, only one knows one's pain. That strike just now had completely numbed his right palm, causing his entire right arm to tremble slightly. The tyrannical energy aura of the Qilin arm made him extremely uncomfortable, completely affecting all the energy in his body. Even his Azura blade was unable to completely dissolve the tyrannical energy. Seeing Chi-Yu once again standing in front of him with both hands behind his back, Miero finally felt some joy in his heart. In his opinion, perhaps Chi-Yu had suffered more damage than him. After all, he had absolute confidence in his Azura blade. The direct collision was very likely to have injured Chi-Yu's hand. The silver light disappeared, and the Kirin pattern on Chi-Yu's body began to fluctuate strangely. The green light dyed Ink Kirin's body, and the faint wind became stronger. In the blink of an eye, it was already revolving around his body. With a smile, Chi-Yu looked at Miero and said, "Let's continue." Miero nodded, and with the same speed, he rushed towards Chi-Yu. However, this time, it was not Chi-Yu's Kirin's arm that blocked his attack. The green wind blades appeared around Chi-Yu's body like a whirlpool, and the green color quickly turned greenish-gray. The whistling sound of the wind blades piercing through the air came like a tidal wave. The wind blades formed a circular shape, and they swept towards Miero's body. Miero was shocked, but his forward momentum did not change. He raised his right arm high, and seeing the wind blades approaching him, he shouted and slashed down with the Azura blade. The greenish-golden blade light surged out. It was as thin as paper, but it compressed a terrifying amount of energy. The wind stopped. The next moment, Miero's body had already broken through the wind under the sharpness of the Azura blade, and in the blink of an eye, he was already in front of Chi-Yu. The greenish-golden Azura blade light did not weaken much, and it had already reached Chi-Yu's forehead. Turning sideways, Chi-Yu stepped on Kirin and quietly moved to the side. At the same time, a purple electric light appeared out of thin air. It stood between the two of them. Miero's speed was very fast, and his Azura blade was even comparable to lightning. However, it was not the speed of real lightning after all. The appearance of the purple electric light did not give him a chance to dodge, and it landed on his right arm. Amidst the crackling sound, Miero groaned, and his body retreated 3 meters. The greenish-golden light on his right arm shone brightly. Resisting the numbness all over his body, he slashed at Chi-Yu again. Looking at his attack, Chi-Yu could not help but be surprised. After all, under the illumination of Kirin's thunderlight, he still had the strength to attack. From this, one could see how powerful Mieros was. The thundercloud force could not be broken by his Azura blade, but he did not forget to attack even when he was injured. Such a strong fighting spirit made Chi-Yu somewhat admire him. What was after the wind and thunder? Was it fire? No. It was not fire, it was water. As the saying goes, if you cut the water with a knife, the water would flow faster. The wind was restrained by the Azura blade, and the thunder could not really hurt Miero. However, water was the real enemy of his Azura blade in its current state. A blue whirlpool appeared, and Miero's Azura blade was sucked into it. The Azura blade lived up to its name of sharpness, and it broke out of the water in an instant. However, the owner of the Azura blade was also swallowed by the water at the same time. The paralyzed Miero could not dodge at all. In the blue whirlpool, his body was sent into the air. The Azura blade that he had sent out was also slightly off course due to the water cloud's influence. Chi-Yu stood there without moving, allowing the Azura blade to pass in front of him, cutting off a few strands of hair that were blown up by the wind. In the loud bang, Miero's body was thrown to the ground. Chi-Yu did not really want to hurt him, so in the whirlpool, he did not receive any special treatment from the thundercloud force. The heavy fall made Miero's body feel like it was falling apart, and the intense pain was transmitted from the nerve endings of his bones and muscles to his brain. He struggled to stand up, and his body was completely wet. Seeing that Chi-Yu did not chase after him, his resolute gaze suddenly became complicated. I have lost. However, I still want to try again, Miero said in a low voice. Chi-Yu smiled and said, You did not lose, you were just a little careless. I don't think you've shown your true strength yet, have you? Come on. Let the real battle begin. Miero nodded and looked at Chi-Yu. His eyes could not help but show a trace of admiration. From the second attack until now, Chi-Yu still had his hands behind his back, and did not move at all. In the face of absolute power, this was not contempt. It must be known, when Chi-Yu was facing the attacks of the 5 Zodiac Guardian Divine Warriors, he was also like this. Even if Miero was strong, and could be ranked in the top 3 of the Constellation Guardians, his strength was at most comparable to Ryue, and compared to Chi-Yu, he was still far from it. Miero's hand patted on his own box, and a low constellation protection sound came out. Immediately, the dim box lit up, and stars rose up, enveloping Miero's body. In the dark night sky, the stars that belonged to the Scorpio constellation all lit up, and could be seen clearly in the sky. Under the shine of the stars, Miero's aura immediately changed. The huge amount of energy continued to condense in his body, all the bones in his body crackled. The star power from the Scorpio constellation continuously entered his body, and a green-gold armor quietly covered his body. The armor was very simple. It was not a full body armor, but a special arm guard armor, which only protected his right arm and right palm, and not a single piece of armor appeared on his body. The Scorpio constellation does not need defense. My star power will only increase my attack power, and I only need to attack. Attacking is my everything. Looking at Chi-Yu, Miero set out the specialty of his star power. Feeling the change in the aura of his right arm and right hand, Chi-Yu could not help but be shocked. Such a strong and sharp aura. This time, it could no longer be described as tragic. It was completely like the aura of hell, full of the aura of destruction. This time, Miero did not rush towards Chi-Yu, but slowly raised his right arm above his head. If you can take this blade of mine, then I will accept the result of failure with all my heart. As he said that, his body side faced Chi-Yu, and what was facing Chi-Yu was the sharpness of the Shura blade. A strange scene appeared. The green-gold armor on his right arm actually extended downwards, completely showing the side of Chi-Yu's body. At this time, the Shura blade was no longer Miero's right arm, but Miero himself. Body and blade as one, fully unleashing the Shura blade's attack power. It is either success or death. Miero, why are you doing this? Feeling Miero's monstrous battle intent, Chi-Yu could not help but let out a faint smile. If I use any other method to defeat you, it will be an insult to you. As you wish. You will see the sharpest energy in the world. Learning from Miero, Chi-Yu also turned his body sideways. The silver light on Kirin's arm disappeared, and so did the light of the thundercloud force. Gold-like energy appeared on his right arm. Just like Miero, the golden energy spread from his right arm to his right leg, forming a huge blade on the side of his body. However, it was the blade of a sword, and the length of the blade was about 3 inches longer than his palm. The energy was condensed, and there was not even a feeling of swallowing or spitting. The sharp energy was completely restrained, quietly staring at Miero. Chapter 188. The powerful energy was fully displayed. Although the sharp aura was not exposed, Chi-Yu standing there made Mephistopheles feel fear from the bottom of his heart. Miero, admit defeat. Mephistopheles roared. No. No one could stop Mieros from unleashing this saber strike. This saber strike contained all of his energy, as well as his life force. Looking at Chi-Yu, his eyes were filled with excitement and gratification. He seemed to be appreciating that Chi-Yu was willing to use this method to fight with him. Miero moved. It was not his body that moved, but the blade, the Azura blade. Capricorn Constellation Guardian's ultimate skill, Azura, Hell / Miero announced his ability. His body disappeared completely at this moment. In the dark night, there was only that huge greenish-gold blade. Mephistopheles closed his eyes. His fists were clenched tightly. He had already guessed the result from Chi Yu's energy. The azure-gold Azura blade arrived in front of Chi Yu in an instant. Chi Yu did not move, nor did he launch an attack. He allowed the Azura blade, which seemed to be able to split the heavens and earth, to strike his side. It collided with the golden light. It could also be said that he let Miero use his life to hit his body. There was no sound, not even the sound of the air being torn apart. Everything was over. When the sharpness reached its peak, the effect of extreme sorrow came to an end. Silence, absolute silence. Mephistopheles could not imagine the final outcome. He did not want to open his eyes for a long time, because he did not want to see his good friend Miero's body cut in half. But in the end, he still opened his eyes. And what he saw, it was completely different from what he had imagined. Chi Yu was still standing there, but his hands were behind his back. His eyes were calm, and the pattern on his body had completely disappeared. Miero was not cut in half either. He stood in front of Chi Yu, still maintaining his attacking posture. From the tip of his right little finger all the way to his feet, a bloody line appeared on the side of his body, and drops of blood slowly flowed down. The golden-green light completely disappeared, and he stood there in a daze. Looking at Chi Yu, he did not even have the slightest emotional fluctuation. Mia Aro. Mephistopheles' fat body charged forward with frightening speed. Stop. A low voice rang out, and a wall of air blocked Mephisto's body. It was condensed from the greenish-gray wind. What are you doing? Don't I even have the right to collect his corpse? Mephistopheles glared angrily at the expert from the east. Chi Yu said calmly, "If you don't want him to die, then stand there and don't move. And don't disturb me." Mephisto was stunned. What did you say? Could it be that Miero was still alive? How is this possible? Under the effect of the Azura Hell Slash, there were only two outcomes. One was the enemy's death, and the other was his own death. Mephisto was very clear about this outcome. In the past, the enemy had always died. But now, it was obvious that Chi Yu had obtained the final victory, so the only outcome was Miero's own death. But this man in front of him said, "Do you really want him to die?" "I said he won't die, so he won't die." Chi Yu moved, and in a flash, he was already in front of Miero. A blue light floated out and embraced Miero's body. Then, he raised his right hand. Miero was about the same height as Chi Yu. When he raised his right hand, he could just reach the tip of Miero's right little finger. A faint green light appeared on Chi Yu's right index finger. It started from the tip of Miero's bloody line and slowly slid down. Everywhere it passed, the bloody line disappeared without a trace. The green light continued to spread. When Chi Yu's right index finger finally retracted from Miero's right foot, the bloody line from before seemed to have never appeared. Miero's skin was still smooth, but his current appearance was not very elegant. The pants on his right leg were completely torn, and even his shoes were cut, revealing his very white thighs. Of course, unlike women, his thighs were full of muscles. With a muffled groan, Miero opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Chi Yu raised his right hand and supported his right shoulder, preventing him from collapsing. Miero could breathe again. He panted heavily, and looked at Chi Yu with an incomprehensible look in his eyes. "Why? Tell me why?" Chi Yu looked at him, and his face revealed a faint smile. "What why? Why didn't I kill you? What good would it do me to kill you? You are the Constellation Guardian, and I am the Zodiac Guardian God. Our mission is to protect. Although the object of protection is different, we are not enemies. Yuma hopes that we can become friends, and I also hope so. Moreover, we are only exchanging pointers. Every time we exchange pointers, we have to kill people. How many people do we have to kill? But I wanted to kill you just now," Miero said weakly. Chi-Yu smiled indifferently and said, "If your ability is enough to threaten my life, you would already be a dead man. Actually, you don't have to be discouraged. You did not lose unjustly." Miero looked at Chi-Yu and his gaze changed. "Can you tell me, what is that? What could have defeated my Shura blade?" Chi-Yu smiled and said, "You used your strength to prove that you are qualified to know it." Speaking until here, his gaze became much deeper. In our Yanwang Republic, there were 10 great divine weapons passed down in ancient times. Among these 10 divine weapons, there is one with the strongest attack power. It represents the demeanor of a king and represents the unstoppable sharpness. Its name is called the Xianyuan sword. Xianyuan sword? Divine weapon? Yes, you did not lose to me, but to the Xianyuan sword. Not to mention the Azura blade. Even the scepter of the goddess of victory is not as sharp as it. Actually, you do not know. Fish Eye and I have already made our move. The wind wall blocking Mephisto had already disappeared. He could not help but take a few steps forward and asked, "Then what is the result?" "What is the result?" Chi-Yu smiled and said, "Just like how Miero proved his strength in front of me, I also proved my strength in front of Yamu. That is why we can reach a cooperative relationship. That is why she can become my fiancée, isn't it? As for the result, is it really that important?" Mephisto's expression suddenly changed. "I understand. Miss actually lost." Chi-Yu was stunned. "Why do you say that?" Mephisto smiled bitterly. "Do you think I don't know how dangerous it is to fuse Athena's 3 divine weapons? If Miss did not lose to you, why would she choose to do such a dangerous fusion? Miss, you are still too strong." Chi-Yu looked at Mephisto in a daze. He murmured, "At that time, it seems to be more appropriate to call it a draw." Mephisto shook his head with a bitter smile. "No, it is not. If it was only a draw, with Mrs. Steady personality, she would not have made such a rash decision. She did not even discuss it with us. I also finally understand why Miss announced her engagement with you. All of this was caused by the battle between you and Mississippi." Listening to Mephisto's words, Chi-Yu could not help but have a strange feeling in his heart. "That's right. Yamu agreed to become my wife and wanted to cooperate with me to let me protect her. All of this was after our match. Could it be that she really made such a decision because of my provocation? If that was the case, then it was enough to prove that she had no feelings for me at all." Thinking of this, Chi-Yu suddenly felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. It was a kind of indescribable feeling. His eyes dimmed a lot. He loosened the hand holding Miero's shoulder and said lightly, "Your injury is not serious. You were just pierced by the sharp edge of Xuanyuan's sword. I have helped you to heal it. With the healing ability of my water thundercloud force, you only need to rest for a few days to recover." When Miero launched his ultimate attack, Chi-Yu used his powerful thundercloud force to forcibly control the sharpness of Xuanyuan's sword within a certain range. After completely breaking the sharpness of Miero's attack, he stopped in time and did not kill him. Mephisto stepped forward to support Miero's body. He looked deeply at Chi-Yu and said, "No matter what, thank you." Chi-Yu smiled indifferently and said, "There is no need to thank me. Didn't I say just now? I don't want to be your enemy. It's late and you should rest. Me too." As he spoke, he appeared at the entrance of Parthenon and sat down cross-legged on the steps. He closed his eyes as if nothing mattered to him. Miero let out a long breath and looked at Mephisto beside him. "Now I understand why Miss chose him. It is also the first time I feel that this man is really qualified to be Mrs. Husband." Mephisto smiled bitterly and said, "Mrs. Wisdom is beyond our imagination. She is the goddess of war and wisdom. Everything is up to Mississippi. No, you rest here first. I have to go and warn the others not to provoke Mr. Chi again. Who could guarantee that he would hold back like this the next time? Miero, if we join forces, do you think we have a chance to beat him?" Miero looked deeply at Mephisto and said, Then do you think it is possible for the 11 of us to beat Miss? I don't think I need to tell you the final result. Mephisto's body trembled. The result will be that some of us will die and he will escape. The two looked at each other and saw the horror in each other's eyes. Yes, with the strength of Chi-Yu and Yamu, even if they were not a match for them, they could definitely kill a few people and leave. They had no ability to stop such strong people from leaving. Early in the morning, when the sun once again shone on the ancient city of Athens, Chi-Yu slowly opened his eyes. Feeling the warm sunshine on his body, he stretched his body and stood up from the steps in front of Parthenon. Looking at the bright sunshine, Chi-Yu revealed a cheerful smile. After a night of cultivation, he was in a very good state of mind. He took out his coat from the Kirin pearl and put it on. He moved his legs and feet, feeling the taste of blood flowing in his meridians. He could not help but want to scream. "You're awake." A gentle voice sounded from behind Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu smiled slightly and replied, "That's right. You came out, how can I not wake up?" Yama walked to Chi-Yu's side and stood there. "Thank you for not killing Miero last night." Chi-Yu said, "You seem to have thought that I would not kill him, right? Why didn't you stop me from fighting him? You should know what the final result is, right?" Yama smiled and said, "Is that all you want to ask me?" He turned around and faced Yama. She was still in the simple but elegant white dress from last night. "Then what do you want me to ask?" Yama looked at him deeply and said, "I just want you to know that if it is not from the heart, I will not wrong myself no matter the reason. Can you understand?" There was a smile in Chi-Yu's deep eyes. "Let's give each other some time. We still have a long way to go, don't we?" Yama sighed and said, "Yes. The road is still long. Do you want to go to the Aegean Sea? At that time we will see one of the most beautiful scenery in Greece, and it is only 8 kilometers away from Athens." Chi-Yu smiled and said, "It is my honor to be able to travel the sea with a beauty." Yama smiled and said, "You will definitely like the Aegean Sea, because it is my favorite place." Chi-Yu, "Then let's go and have a look." The constellation guardians had already quietly surrounded him, including Ilias and Salem, who had accompanied him to check on his injuries yesterday. The 11 constellation guardians looked at Chi-Yu with much calmer eyes than yesterday, as if they had accepted the fact that Chi-Yu and Yamu were engaged. Yama said, "Ilias, you guys go and drive the car over. Let's go to the Aegean Sea to have a look." Ilias hesitated for a moment, and his eyes fell on Mephisto. Mephisto said, "Miss, you should meditate in your current situation. I am afraid that it will be dangerous if you go outside and it is not good for your health." Yamu said indifferently, "Dangerous? Do you think that under the protection of so many of you, I will still be in danger? As for my health, I think taking a walk is my best choice now. Chi-Yu came all the way from Yenhuang Republic, and I have already promised to be his guide. How can I go back on my word because of my own reasons? Don't say any more, go and drive the car." From Athens to the Aegean Sea was indeed very close. In less than half an hour, they had already arrived at their destination, and this was including the time wasted in Athens. Chi-Yu and Yamu got off the car one after another. The constellation guardians discussed for a while and decided to travel by boat. This way they could at least minimize contact with outsiders. After all, Yamu's current physical condition was no different from that of an ordinary girl. From last night until now, Chi-Yu did not find anything wrong with these 11 constellation guardians. It must be known that Yamu's Athens Shipping Company was the largest shipping company in Greece. After a while, a small 3-story luxury yacht appeared in their sight. The Aegean Sea was really beautiful. The blue sea water was so clear that there seemed to be no flaws. The sea breeze blew, bringing a little coolness to this hot summer. Yamu's skin was very white, and under the sunlight, it was even a little dazzling. Blue sky, blue water, stunning Athena. Chi-Yu's heart was completely immersed in a feeling of harmony with the beauty of heaven and earth. Everyone boarded the yacht. Under the escort of the constellation guardians, Chi-yu and Yamu went to the third floor of the yacht alone. The yacht steadily sailed out of the bay and headed towards the depths of the blue sea. Yamu combed her long purple hair that was a little messy from the sea breeze. Looking at Chi-yu, she somewhat mischievously said, "How much do you know about our Aegean Sea?" Chi-yu smiled bitterly. "Don't test me, I'm illiterate. I only heard that the Aegean Sea seems to be a very romantic place. I don't know anything else. If you regret marrying an illiterate in the future, it's still not too late. After all, we're only engaged." As he said that, he even winked at Yamu playfully. Not knowing why, Chi-yu always felt that the powerless Yamu was much cuter than the powerful successor of Athena. At least today, he saw more than once on Yamu's face that a girl should have. Compared to the saintly Yamu, the current her was even more alluring, and could more easily attract Chi-yu's heart. Yamu rolled her eyes at him, and said, "Don't you Yan Huang people have a saying that if you marry a chicken, follow the chicken, and if you marry a dog, follow the dog? I already have the status, how can you make me go back on my words? Even if you're a pig, I can only accept my fate." Chi-yu said angrily, "You actually called me a pig?" Yamu giggled and said, "Aren't you? Do you know how much you ate in the car just now? That's breakfast. You've eaten half a month's worth of breakfast. Luckily, I've prepared a lot. Otherwise, I'd really be poor because of you." Chi-yu laughed and said, "The great goddess Athena, the richest woman in Greece. You actually say that you're afraid of being eaten poor by your husband. Do I eat a lot? I don't think so myself. Even if I eat a little more, it's normal. Haven't you noticed that I'm still in my puberty period?" Yamu stuck out her tongue at Chi-yu and said, "What puberty period? Look at you, you're so big and burly, there's no sign of puberty at all." Chi-yu chuckled and said, "Tell me about the Aegean Sea, I want to hear it from you." As he said that, he leaned against the railing of the third floor of the yacht, and tilted his head to look at Yamu. Yamu smiled slightly and said, "Then I'll tell you about it. The Aegean Sea is a large bay of the Mediterranean Sea. It's the cradle of the early civilization of Crete and Greece. It's located between the Greek peninsula and Asia Minor. In the northeast, it's connected to the Black Sea through the Dardanelles Strait, the Sea of Marmara, and the Bosporus Strait, and in the south to Crete. Islands of all sizes are scattered in between. The Aegean Sea's coastline is winding, and there are countless bays, harbors, and small sheltered harbors." Stop. Just as Yamu said this, she was interrupted by Chi-yu. "Miss, you're telling me about geography. Do you think I can remember it? I've never been interested in these things. I want to hear you tell stories, not an introduction to the geography of the Aegean Sea." Yamu said unhappily, "Can't you learn more?" Chi-yu laughed and said, "Why would I learn so much? My wife is the Greek goddess Athena. It's enough for you to know. I just want to hear a story, a touching story." Yamu looked at him, and her eyes suddenly became more gentle. She walked to Chi-yu's side, stretched out her slender little hand, and gently helped him comb his messy hair. "Sometimes you're like an old man, but sometimes you're like a child. I still like you like this. Not the Kirin who seems to hide countless secrets." Yamu's cold little hand combed his hair, and Chi-yu couldn't help but moan comfortably. The strange feeling in his heart suddenly became stronger, and he couldn't help but have the urge to hold her in his arms. However, Yamu's senses were very sharp. When she saw Chi-yu's eager eyes, she quickly turned around and ran to the other side of the yacht, and said with a smile, "Don't have any bad thoughts." Seeing that Yamu ran away, Chi-yu didn't chase after her, and said with a smile, "What bad thoughts can a husband have for his wife? This is human nature. If I have bad thoughts about you, it proves that I have you in my heart. If it were an outsider I don't know, it would be impossible for me to be interested in her. So, you should be happy." Yamu's cute little nose twitched. "You're so annoying, it's all nonsense. Well, be a good girl and I'll tell you a story." "What about it?" "I'll tell you a story about the origin of the Aegean Sea, okay?" Chi-yu smiled, As long as it's a story, I like it. Tell me. Rain. I combed her long hair behind her back and leaned against the fence. There was a glimmer of light in her eyes as she slowly said, in ancient times there was a king called Minos who ruled an island in the Aegean Sea, Crete. Minos's son was murdered by a conspiracy in Attica, Athens. In order to avenge his son, Minos challenged the people of Athens. Under the punishment of God, Athens was full of famine and plagues. Under Minos's challenge, the Athenians sued for peace with King Minos. Minos asked them to send 7 pairs of virgin boys and girls to Crete every 9 years. Minos built a labyrinth of countless palaces in Crete. The labyrinth was so winding that no one could come out. Deep in the labyrinth, Minos raised a beast with a human body and a bull's head. The 7 pairs of virgin boys and girls sent by Athens each time were sacrificed to the Minos. This year, it was the year of worship for the virgin boys and girls. The parents of the virgin boys and girls were terrified. Theseus, the son of the Aegean king of Athens, was deeply disturbed to see people suffer such misfortune. He decided to set off with the virgin boys and girls, and swore to kill the Minos. The people of Athens saw off the 7 pairs of virgin boys and girls, including Theseus, amid the cries of sorrow. Theseus made a deal with his father. If he killed the Minos, he would turn the black sails of the ship into white sails on the return voyage. As long as the black sails of the ship turned white, it meant that the Aegean king would see his son Theseus again. Theseus led the virgin boys and girls ashore in Crete. His handsomeness attracted the attention of the beautiful and intelligent princess Ariadne, the daughter of King Minos. The princess expressed her love for Theseus and met him in secret. When she learned of Theseus's mission, she gave him a magic sword and a ball of string to protect Theseus from the Minos. As soon as the clever and brave Theseus entered the labyrinth, he tied one end of the ball of string to the entrance of the labyrinth, then let go of the ball of string and followed the winding and complicated passages deeper into the labyrinth. Finally, he found the monster Minos. He grabbed the Minos by the horns and used the sword that Princess Ariadne had given him to kill the Minos. Then he led the virgin boys and girls out of the labyrinth along the lines. To prevent King Minos from pursuing them, they cut through the bottoms of all the Cretan ships on the coast. Princess Ariadne helped them, escaped from Crete with them, and set sail for home. After a few days of sailing, they finally saw their homeland, Athens. Theseus and his companions were very excited, singing and dancing, but he forgot his agreement with his father and did not change the black sails to white sails. The king of the Aegean Sea, who was waiting for his son's return, was waiting for his son's return by the sea. Thinking that his son had been eaten by the Minos, he was so grief-stricken that he jumped into the sea and committed suicide. In memory of the Aegean Sea, the sea he jumped into was called the Aegean Sea. Chiyu listened quietly. Yamu did not speak fast, and listening to her moving voice was a very wonderful thing in itself, not to mention the poignant story of the Aegean Sea. His heart had become as gentle as water at this time. He slowly walked to Yamu's side, gently took her hand and said, "Why are love stories always a little more tragic?" Yamu sighed and said, "Perhaps it's because tragedies are easier to remember." Chiyu somewhat domineeringly embraced Yamu. "I don't like tragedies. I only like comedies. Tell me, will our future be tragedies or comedies?" Listening to Chiyu's words, Yamu's delicate body trembled slightly, and her eyes looked a little confused. "I don't know. Chiyu, I really don't know." Seeing the trace of struggle in her eyes, Chiyu slowly let go of her hand. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you." Yamu shook her head and gently leaned her back into Chiyu's arms. "Don't talk, let's quietly look at the sea in front of us and listen to the voice of the dead king. Perhaps the Aegean Sea will bless us." Chiyu nodded, his hands obediently wrapped around Yamu's waist, and his warm big hands pressed against her smooth belly. Quietly, he and Yamu looked at the azure sea in front of them. At this moment, a sudden cough sounded, startling both Yamu and Chiyu at the same time. At that moment, Chi Yu even forgot to use his mental power to scan everything around him, and did not even know that someone had come to the third floor of the yacht. Turning around, Chi Yu's fierce gaze swept towards the entrance of the third floor, only to see Soso standing there with a large tray, looking at Chi Yu and Yamu. Her expression was very strange, as if she did not dare to meet Chi Yu's fierce gaze, and hurriedly said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you. I just came to deliver some fruits and drinks." As she spoke, she hurriedly put the tray in her hands on the table on the third floor of the yacht, and immediately ran down. Chi Yu was a little vexed. She ruined the atmosphere. Yamu pulled Chi Yu's hand and smiled. Forget it, she didn't do it on purpose. I wonder if a certain someone can still eat fruits? Chi Yu smiled. Don't you know that my stomach is a bottomless pit? Yamu laughed. What bottomless pit? Why haven't I heard that a human stomach can be a bottomless pit? As she spoke, she stepped forward and picked up an apple, but just as she was about to put it into her mouth, Chi Yu snatched it away. What are you doing? Yamu looked at Chi Yu, a hint of rebuke on her pretty face, but her eyes were smiling. Chi Yu took a hard bite and ate almost half of the apple. The apple you took was delicious. You don't want me to bite it? All right, then I'll return it to you. As he spoke, he stuffed the apple that he had already taken a bite of into Yamu's hand. Yamu looked at Chi Yu, a hint of shyness in her eyes, and she lowered her head, murmuring, "Are you forcing me?" Chi Yu smiled. "You've already given me your first contact with a man, your first hug. Do you still care about eating an apple for the first time with me?" Raising her head again, Yamu looked at Chi Yu with slight annoyance, but she still put the apple into her mouth. Of course, she wouldn't eat it in big mouthfuls like Chi Yu without any image. She gently took a small bite, and even when she was eating, her movements were still so graceful. It was a classical beauty with a hint of shyness, and Chi Yu couldn't help but be stunned once again. Don't misunderstand, I'm not willing to eat an apple with you. I know that you're afraid that the apple is poisonous, so you took a bite first. Yamu tried to cover it up. Chi Yu smiled. You're really an expert. Chapter 189. No, it's because you haven't experienced my bad side yet, and I'm constantly showing it to you. Yamu was angry. She threw the apple at Chi Yu and said, "Annoying. Can't you be more serious?" Chi Yu caught the apple with his mouth, took a bite, and said, "Why do I have to be serious? I think it's very good now. Do you want to see a pretentious me?" Yamu walked to the fence and looked at the endless sea. "Chi Yu, can you really accompany me for 3 months?" Chi Yu shook his head and said, "Of course not." Yamu suddenly turned around, her beautiful eyes filled with disappointment. Chi Yu laughed evilly and said, "It should be you accompanying me for 3 months. You, that's right. I'm so bad. How about you? Why don't I let you bite me?" Chi Yu wretchedly moved closer. Yamu pushed his face away and said, "Annoying. But, I remember you said that you can only stay in Greece for a month, and you have to go to other Western countries. Won't I delay your matters?" Chi Yu shook his head and said, "Of course not. I said, you're the one accompanying me, not me accompanying you." Yamu was startled. She looked at him in shock and said, "What do you mean?" Chi Yu smiled mysteriously and said, "It's good that you understand. Can't I?" Yamu looked at the 2 floors below the yacht, and said hesitantly, "But, Chi Yu, there's no but. You've already lost your energy, what can you do by staying in Greece? Furthermore, in this kind of situation, your constellation guardians are protecting you every day, and they are afraid of each other, who would dare to do anything. Don't you want to create a chance for them, and let the tumor truly appear? Not to mention, don't you want to play in other Western countries? What's the point of staying in the same place all the time? No matter how beautiful the Aegean Sea is, you won't be able to feel its beauty if you look at it every day." Yamu was obviously tempted. Looking at Chi Yu's gaze softened, he said in a low voice, "But they won't allow me to leave Greece under such circumstances. How are we going to leave?" Chi Yu smiled bitterly and said, "You are the goddess Athena. Is it that difficult to get a passport? Or is it the manager of the Athens shipping company? They won't let you go. We can also sneak away. With my abilities, I wouldn't be Kirin if I couldn't get you out of Greece under their watch. Let's take a step back. So what if you don't have a passport? At most, I can fly you out of Greece. Anyway, this place is not far from other Western countries, right? Yamu's eyes revealed a hint of excitement. Sneak away? I've never experienced it before. When are we going to run? Chiyu said, a month later. Yamu was taken aback and said, is it going to take that long? Chiyu smiled and said, I don't know who was hesitating just now. Now you're anxious. Of course it's going to take a month. Don't forget, Ming Ming and Lin Yifan's agreement is a month. If we go, we naturally have to take Ming Ming with us. Yamu looked at Chiyu's eyes dimmed a bit. She smiled somewhat self-deprecatingly. I forgot. I'm not the only one for you. Chiyu sighed and said, it's not that you forgot, you just don't want to think about it. I'm sorry. Yamu shook her head and said, it's nothing. In fact, you and I both know that even now our relationship is just a cooperative one. Don't worry, I won't make things difficult for you. If Miss Ming Ming has any misunderstandings, I can also explain for you. Chiyu said, no need. I think, with Ming Ming's trust in me, I don't need to explain. Yamu's purple eyes quickly regained their luster. Okay, let's not talk about this, okay? At least for this month, you belong to me. I'll take you to have fun in Greece for a month. I think that's enough time. Chiyu, can you promise me that during this month, try not to think about your girlfriends, okay? Hearing Yamu's pleading voice, Chiyu nodded almost subconsciously. Okay, I promise you. Yamu's pretty face regained a smile, and she looked at Chiyu with a smile and said, don't regret it. I'm really looking forward to this month. But I'm a little afraid that this month will pass too quickly. Ever since I was young, I finally had a month that belonged to me. This month, I'm Yamu, not Athena. Chiyu pulled her in front of him and looked deeply into her purple eyes. He said firmly, yes, you're Yamu, not Athena. From the second day that Chiyu and Ming Ming arrived in Athens, the real tour began. Every day, Chiyu and Ming Ming could only see each other in the hotel at night. On the surface, Ming Ming seemed to be angry and didn't pay attention to him at all. Every day, Chiyu and Yamu, Ming Ming and Lin Yifan would go out to play. Very tacitly, they went to different places every day. From the first day to the 30th day, they didn't see each other. However, the two pairs who traveled to Greece at the same time had different effect. Until the 30th day, Lin Yifan didn't even touch Ming Ming's hand. He had tried his best. All the romance that a man could create, he had shown it to Ming Ming. However, Ming Ming also made him understand that true love couldn't be changed by material power. But Chiyu and Yamu had a completely different result. In a month, starting from the Aegean Sea, they almost visited all the famous historical sites in Greece and all the beautiful places. Although there were always 11 people following them, they seemed to have forgotten everything. They were completely immersed in joy. It was the first time in her life that Yamu could completely control her own month. What about Chiyu? It was the first time in his life that he had been so happy for a whole month. Before becoming a Zodiac guardian god warrior, Chiyu's life could be said to be dark. After he became a Zodiac guardian god warrior, he had to carry too many things on his shoulders. Training, fighting, they were all in his life. How could he have time to play? In this month, he was really happy to the point that he forgot to be vigilant. He was with Yamu every day. He rarely went back to the hotel. The staircase at the entrance of Parthenon became the place where he spent most of his nights. Playing in the day, training at night. Chiyu and Yamu were together almost all the time. Even when they were not together, they only had each other's shadows in their hearts. Mephisto had secretly discussed this with Miero. From the time they knew Yamu and became constellation guardians until now, it had been so many years. Yamu's smile seemed to be more than this month. In the end, even the constellation guardians could not bear to disturb the two of them. They tried to stay as far away as possible. After all, they had a deep understanding of Chi-Yu's strength. With Chi-Yu by Yamu's side, even if the Pope came, it would not be easy to hurt Yamu. Good times always passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, a month had finally passed. Night fell. The last day of playing in Greece made Chi-Yu a little unhappy. It was finally time to leave. Sitting on the staircase in front of Parthenon, he thought about everything that had happened in the past month. It kept flashing in front of his eyes. This month, to him, was like leaving reality. It was as if he had broken away from reality. Everything was no longer important, and he had completely released himself. And Chi-Yu was surprised to find that his indulgence did not cause his cultivation to drop. Instead, with his open heart, he relied on the training at night to raise his strength to the peak of the 6 clouds realm. And the bottleneck between the 6 clouds and 7 clouds actually loosened. It seemed like he could break through at any time. He did not forget to call Ryue and Wen Ting every day, and it was always at night. Apart from cultivating at night, he was in contact with his 3 beloved women. Although he still remembered the spiritual communication with Ming Ming and what Ming Ming told him about Lin Yifan, but in his eyes, there was more of Yamu's shadow. It was over. The month of indulgence was over. It was time for him to return to reality. Although in this month, Chi-Yu did not grasp too many secrets about the Constellation Guardians, he did not regret it at all. This month of indulgence allowed him to experience the joy of life again. Looking up at the bright moon in the sky, Chi-Yu let out a long sigh. There was a faint smile in his eyes. He would be leaving tomorrow. Although he would still be with Yamu, he had to return to reality. He still had to do what he had to do. There were still many things waiting for him. Chi-Yu. Yamu's gentle voice sounded. Turning around, Chi-Yu naturally held Yamu's hand. And Mephistopheles, who was also at the main entrance of Parthenon, turned around awkwardly, as if he did not see anything. That day, Chi-Yu showed mercy to Miero. He had already gained his respect. Towards Chi-Yu and Yamu's simple intimate actions, he turned a blind eye. Why did you come out? You should have started training at this time. Oh right, I haven't asked you. How is your fusion with the divine weapon? Yamu shyly glanced at Chi-Yu and said, "Come in with me first." With that, she actually pulled Chi-Yu's hand and walked into Parthenon. This was the first time in a month. Chi-Yu could not help but be a little surprised. He looked at Yamu and teased, "My goddess, is it because I am leaving, so you decided to devote your life to me?" Yamu snorted, "Stop dreaming. Let's go, I have something to say to you." Turning around, Mephistopheles looked at the back view of the 2 entering Parthenon. He wanted to stop them, but in the end, he did not say anything to stop them. He thought to himself, "Forget it, Chi-Yu is going to leave. It's okay to let them talk for a while. Miss knows what to do." With a faint smile, Chi-Yu's eyes revealed a faint light. When he and Yamu re-entered Parthenon, he was a little surprised to find that after not coming here for a month, the holy aura in Parthenon seemed to be stronger than the last time he came here. Could it be because Yamu had injected energy into Athena's divine weapon? "Chi-Yu, I thought about it, I still don't want to go with you." Yamu lowered her voice and gestured to Chi-Yu to use thundercloud force to create a space that only belonged to them. Under the energy isolation, Chi-Yu asked, "Why? Didn't we already agree?" Yamu shook her head and said, "I'm sorry, I've thought about it carefully. If I go with you for 2 months, I'm afraid that the Constellation Guardians will be resentful. After all..." Chi-Yu waved his hand and stopped Yamu from continuing. "No, you have to go with me. You've already promised me. You're a goddess, you can't go back on your word." Yamu pleaded, "Chi-Yu, I really can't go." Chi-Yu smiled and said, "Why can't you go? Is there a disaster in Greece that requires you to stay? But don't forget, you've already lost all your energy. Even if you stay, there's no use. Come with me. 2 months is not a long time. Moreover, you can still contact them through the phone. Just give me my phone number." Yamu looked at Chi-Yu, her eyes revealing a struggle. Chi-yu, there are some things that I don't know if I should tell you. Chi-yu waved his hand and said, if it's a secret of the Constellation Guardians, you don't have to say it. Although we're already engaged in name, but I hope that we can leave some space for each other. After all, we belong to the East and the West. Some things, it's better not to say it out loud. I can understand your difficulties, but this time, you have to go with me. I've promised to protect you. Only by having you by my side can I achieve all these. Don't you understand? Don't think so much. You've already applied for the passport, why are you still hesitating? We've already been together for a month. This month, I've been very happy. I believe you're the same. Why not let our happiness be longer? Alright, don't think too much. Whether you leave or not, there are pros and cons. Since that's the case, just take it as you're doing it for me, alright? Looking at Chi-yu, 2 drops of tears fell from the corner of Yamu's eyes. She sighed and nodded her head quietly. Lowering her head, she shifted her gaze to her feet. For you, Chi-yu pulled Yamu into his embrace. Using both hands, he held her delicate face and gently kissed her forehead. Rest well, train hard. Strive to fuse with your divine weapon as soon as possible. Only when you have the strength to protect yourself can I leave in peace. He did not stay any longer, because he did not want the Constellation Guardians to suspect anything. He turned and walked out of Parthenon. Yamu raised her hand, wanting to call Chi-yu back. But when the words reached her mouth, she could not say them. Tears continued to flow. Looking at Chi-yu's tall and sturdy back, her heart trembled slightly. Early in the morning, Chi-yu arrived at the Athens airport under the escort of Mephisto and Miero. When he arrived at the airport, Ming Ming and Lin Yifan were already there. To Chi-yu's surprise, Lin Yifan did not seem to be dissatisfied. She even had a smile on her face. He could not help but feel a little uneasy. He gave Ming Ming an inquiring look. Ming Ming pursed her lips and chuckled, but did not say anything. She looked at Chi-yu with a teasing look in her eyes. Lin Yifan took the initiative to walk in front of Chi-yu and extended his right hand. Chi-yu subconsciously raised his hand and shook it. Mr. Lin, are you here to send us off? Lin Yifan laughed bitterly. To be honest, I'm really not convinced. I'm not convinced why Ming Ming treats you so well. Even after knowing the news of the engagement between you and Miss, her feelings for you have never changed. Chi-yu said with some pride. So are you ready to give up now? Lin Yifan laughed. Give up? Why should I give up? It's just that the form is different. Mr. Chi, I hope that Greece and the Yenwang Republic will be friends forever. Also, you must take good care of Ming Ming. Otherwise, as her brother, I won't agree to it. I know I can't beat you, but if you bully Ming Ming, I will definitely kill my way to the Yenwang Republic with an AK-47. Chi-yu looked at Lin Yifan in bewilderment. When did you? Ming Ming chuckled. Yifan is so outstanding. He's much better than you. Why can't I call him my brother? Chi-yu scratched his head and said awkwardly, Yes, of course you can. Lin Yifan patted Chi-yu's shoulder and smiled. However, after knowing Ming Ming, I'm more and more fascinated by the women in the Eastern Vocational College. If I have the chance to go to the Yenwang Republic again, Mr. Chi, I'll have to trouble you to introduce a girlfriend to me. I won't delay you anymore. Take care. Chi-yu held Ming Ming's hand as they walked into the departure hall. He couldn't help but admire Lin Yifan in his heart. Even though he knew it was impossible, he could still look at the big picture and didn't let his personal affairs affect the relationship between the two countries. Such character was enough to earn his respect. Did you miss me? Ming Ming and Chi-yu sat in the first-class cabin. She leaned her head on Chi-yu's shoulder. Ming Ming gently tapped his leg and asked domineeringly. Of course I missed you. Don't you know that I'm going crazy with jealousy? Chi-yu laughed. Ming Ming twitched her mouth and said, I don't see that. I think you're having too much fun. Miss Yumo is so beautiful. When you're with her, do you still remember to miss me? Chi Yu pulled Ming Ming's little hand to his mouth and kissed it. It's not the same. You know it. The flight to England took off from the airport and headed in the direction of London. An hour after the plane left the Athens airport, there was an earth-shattering uproar in Parthenon. Miss is missing? How could this be? Mephistopheles stood in the middle of Parthenon. His eyes revealed a deep fear. All the constellation guardians were gathered in the temple. Each of them looked at Mephistopheles with a dignified face. Everyone had a different expression. However, they also realized the seriousness of the matter at the same time. Lyumides, your senses are the sharpest among us. Didn't you notice where Miss Breath went? Mephistopheles' gaze fell on the Virgo constellation guardian, who was as pretty as a girl. Lyumides smiled bitterly and shook her head. When did Miss leave? There was no sign at all. You and Miero go and send Chi Yu to the airport. We've been guarding here all along. Previously, we could still clearly feel Miss Breath in the temple. But just now, the young Mrs. Aura suddenly disappeared without any warning. I don't know what's going on. Mephistopheles' breath was obviously unstable. His gaze on Lyumides became extremely sharp. It must be him. It must be him who took Mississippi otherwise. Who else could take Miss away without warning under our surveillance? Ilyas said angrily. Migueles nodded. I agree with Ilyas. It must be Chi Yu who took Mississippi. Mephistopheles was puzzled. But I saw Chi Yu and Miss Ming Ming board the plane together with my own eyes. Saul said. That doesn't prove that Miss didn't go with them. Chi Yu is a very strange person. Maybe he has a way to sneak Miss away. After all, isn't Miss already engaged to him? Is Miss going to abandon us? As soon as Ilyas heard Saul's voice, he became angry. Shut up. How can Miss really marry that person? But Miss doesn't have the ability to protect herself now. If she leaves Athens, the possibility of encountering danger will greatly increase. Mephistopheles, make a decision quickly. Mephistopheles' eyes flashed. He hesitated a little, then said decisively, Well, in that case, I, Miero, Ilyas, Jesse, Salem, and Migueles will immediately take the next plane to London to find Mississippi. The rest of you stay here and wait for news. Once you find anything, contact us immediately. Ilyas said, Let's take Mrs. Private Plane to London. Maybe we can arrive a step earlier than them. In that case we can stop them. Mephistopheles' eyes lit up and he said, Good idea. Then let's go immediately. London, the capital of the United Kingdom, was also known as the Fog City because it was a heavy industrial city. Its environment was indeed much worse than Athens. When Chi Yu and Ming Ming walked out of London Airport, suddenly feeling the filth in the air, the two frowned at the same time. Ming Ming glanced at Chi Yu and said, Where should we go now? Why must we come to London? This city feels far less comfortable than Athens. Chi Yu smiled and said, Of course there is a reason to come here. Don't you want to see Jing again? Ming Ming's eyes lit up and she said, You mean Jing is in London? Chi Yu nodded and said, The last time we were in Dali, Klinsmann secretly told me before he left that the headquarters of the Dracula family is in an old castle on the outskirts of London. I wonder how Jing is now. With Klinsmann's red gold primordial blood last time. She should be a strong person by now. Ming Ming sighed and said, Unfortunately, Jing has become a vampire. That Klinsmann humph. Chi Yu smiled slightly and said, So what if she's a vampire? Hey, they actually caught up so quickly. Ming Ming, let's go quickly. As he spoke, Chi Yu immediately pulled the puzzled Ming Ming out of the airport quickly, hailed a taxi, and headed towards London. What caught up? Chi Yu. What are you talking about? Chi Yu smiled slightly and said, You'll know later, but don't be too surprised. You'll know in a while. But don't be too surprised. Athens was not as far from London as the Yen Huang Republic. Although taking the private jet did not take up any time, Mephisto and the others were still a step behind Chi Yu and the rest when they arrived in London. After taking off an hour later, they could not catch up even if they flew the plane to the limit. When they arrived in London, Chi Yu and Ming Ming could be said to be in the dark. Fortunately, Ming Ming was a university student majoring in foreign languages, and her English was very good, so the two did not make a fool of themselves. The two took the taxi all the way to the center of London before getting out. "Didn't you say that the headquarters of the Dracula family is in the outskirts of London? Then what are we doing in the city now?" Ming Ming asked puzzledly. Chi Yu chuckled and said, "You probably don't understand. Although Klinsmann told me that his castle is in the outskirts, he did not give me the specific address. You have to let me look for it. And the way to look for it is naturally to find a vampire to ask. Vampires are nocturnal, so obviously we can't do it now. Let's find a place to eat first, and then look for Klinsmann at night." Ming Ming said, "Then let's find a hotel. I want to take a shower." Chi Yu shook his head and said, "No, those people are already chasing us. If we stay in a hotel, we will definitely have to register. I'm afraid that they will soon come to our door." At this time, as the two talked, he had already pulled Ming Ming to an empty street. In Yanhuang terms, this was a small alley. No one appeared. "Who the hell is chasing us? Don't tell me we're afraid?" Chi Yu said. "I'm not afraid, but it will be very troublesome if these people catch up. My goddess, it's time for you to come out." While saying that, Chi Yu deliberately used Thousand Transformation Big Dipper Realm to set up an invisibility field, enveloping himself and Ming Ming. In this case, even satellites could not capture their figures. Under Ming Ming's shocked gaze, the Kirin Pearl lit up. With a flash of light, a graceful figure appeared out of thin air in front of her and Chi Yu. Seeing the appearance of this person, Ming Ming couldn't help but cover her small mouth in shock. "Oh my God! Chi Yu, you actually kidnapped someone's goddess." Yamu smiled and said, "Hello, Miss Ming Ming. I will call you Ming Ming, is that okay?" Ming Ming nodded subconsciously. Looking at Yamu, she really couldn't believe that Chi Yu would be so daring. Yamu's appearance also cleared her previous doubts. There was no need to ask who was chasing them, it was definitely the Constellation Guardian. Chi Yu smiled and said, "Ming Ming, you didn't expect this, right?" Ming Ming looked at him strangely and said sourly, "A month together is not enough. Why did you bring her along? What is going on?" It turned out that after Chi Yu and Yamu's discussion, before they left in the morning, he used his familiarity with Yamu's aura and used his own thundercloud force to create the exact same aura. Then he kept Yamu in his own Kirin Pearl and quietly brought the goddess Athena away. As Yamu had lost her own energy, when Chi Yu changed her aura, the energy undulations were not obvious. Furthermore, there was the concealment of the 1,000 opportunities and 100 changes Jade Pearl Realm technique, which made the Constellation Guardians unable to detect it. Chi Yu said, "In order to fuse with Athena's divine weapon, Yamu temporarily transferred all her energy into her divine weapon. So, now she is the same as an ordinary person. And there are probably people with hidden intentions among the Constellation Guardians. For her safety, I brought her out. Once she recovers her strength, everything will be fine. This is also the reason why I cooperated with Yamu." Ming Ming squeezed Chi Yu's hand hard and nodded to Yamu gracefully, saying, "Hello, Sister Yamu, it's hard to believe that Chi Yu could actually bring you out. But now, you don't look like a goddess at all." Hearing Ming Ming's words, Yamu could not help but smile bitterly. She really did not look like a goddess now. Originally, she was pure and holy, but now, she was dressed like this, which she had never experienced in her life. Ever since Chi Yu saw Yamu's revealing leather outfit, it had left a deep impression on him. He found an opportunity to get a set for Yamu. Of course, Yamu refused to wear it, but Chi Yu told her that in order to hide her identity, she had to cover up her pure and holy aura. Without a choice, Yamu fought for it, and after some improvements, she became like this. Black leather pants, from the thighs down, it was completely hollowed out. Her upper body was wearing a small red leather jacket that looked like a vest. It was made of a very thin special leather. It was very breathable. A pair of snow-white arms were exposed, and a bit of skin was also exposed in front of her chest. It completely outlined her figure. In the morning, when Chiyu saw Yamu change into this outfit, he was stunned for a full 5 minutes. He never thought that not only was Yamu beautiful, but her aura was also superb. Even her figure was 1 in a million. Her figure was not as hot as Ryue's, nor was it as seductive as Suasua's. However, every part of her body was perfectly proportioned. The golden ratio appeared at her waist. Her slender legs were perfectly round and straight, and the lines were extremely soft. Her slender waist seemed like it could be grasped with one hand. Although her round breasts were not very exaggerated, they were just at the level where one could grasp them with one hand. Especially that delicate and perky butt, it made Chiyu swallow his saliva. Her long purple wavy hair was tied up and covered by a black baseball cap. The color of her hair was also specially dyed dark red by Chiyu. If one did not see Yamu from the front, or those who were familiar with her aura, they would definitely not be able to recognize that this beautiful and sexy lady was actually the successor of the goddess Athena. Chapter 190. Yamu held the brim of her hat with her hand. Not to mention you, even I can't recognize myself. This dress is a little tight, it's not comfortable to wear. Ming Ming asked curiously, Sister Yamu, what did you wear in the past? Yamu smiled and said gently, I usually wear long dresses. Long dresses are less restrictive and more comfortable to wear. Ming Ming exclaimed in admiration, You look beautiful no matter what you wear. Yamu smiled and said, Ming Ming is not bad too. Don't judge Yifan by his appearance. In fact, he didn't manage to win your heart. I don't know how painful it is for him. Ming Ming blushed and said, Sister Yamu, you can't make fun of me. Chiyu said that your people are already here. Aren't you afraid of being found by them? Chiyu said proudly, If they find me so easily, I don't have to live in this world anymore. As he spoke, he pulled Yamu with one hand and Ming Ming with the other, and walked towards the main road outside. A faint energy was emitted from Chiyu's body and enveloped Yamu's body. The aura that she emitted was not very strong to begin with, was completely blocked and not released at all. Just as Chiyu and the other two were wandering the streets of London, looking for London's specialty snacks, a black message had already filled the entire Western underground world. A $100 million reward for a person's life. This is the first time I've received such unprecedented news. However, the request is really strange. Although the person is going to die, the corpse must be whole and even the blood must be preserved. What kind of request is this? In a dark bar, a tall man looked at the note in his hand with dissatisfaction. The bartender shrugged helplessly and said, I think it's worth it. Isn't it just killing a woman? Since they're willing to pay so much money, it's normal for them to have more requests. Jack, are you going to take it? The man called Jack wore a pair of dark green canvas pants and a sleeveless tight vest, perfectly displaying his majestic granite-like muscles. A cold glint flashed in his eyes. Yes, of course I will. Why not? If this deal succeeds, I can retire early and go to Hawaii to enjoy the beauties on the beach. The bartender sneered, Then you'll have to work hard. The time limit was 1 month, and there were 3 people in total. Don't get it wrong. That woman is beautiful. I've seen her picture. She was the type of classical Western beauty. Don't let your sperm get to your head at that time. I've delayed the mission. Jack snorted disdainfully. How can a beautiful woman compare to $100 million? I'm leaving. As he spoke, he threw out a $10 bill, turned around, and walked out of the bar. A cold glint flashed in the bartender's eyes as he muttered to himself, Jack, I hope your luck is better. There was no limit to the number of people who could participate in this mission. Although you've entered the top 100 in the world, I'm afraid there won't be many chances. At the same time, Assassin organizations all over the world received this $100 million mission in the dark underground world. London was destined to no longer be peaceful. Chi-Yu watched in surprise as Yamu finished her fourth fried fish. Looking at the residue of fried bread on her pretty face, he couldn't help but find it funny. Yamu, have you noticed that your appetite has been growing since I came to Athens? Fish and chips were very famous snacks in London, and the taste was really good. There was already a pile of fish bones in front of Chi-Yu. Yamu glanced at Chi-Yu and said, "Who said I can't eat more?" Ming Ming curiously asked, "Sister Yamu, aren't you afraid of getting fat? Oily food is the easiest to get fat." Yamu smiled and said, "We can use energy to regulate the body fat. It's very simple. You should be able to do it too." Ming Ming's beautiful big eyes lit up. "Is it really possible? That's great. Sister Yamu, you must teach me." Yamu smiled and nodded. She picked up the fifth fish and said, "No problem. I'll teach you later. It's very simple." At this time, she was wearing the oversized sunglasses that only celebrities would wear, which almost covered half of her face. Coupled with the oil stains on her pretty face, she looked very cute. She didn't look like Athena at all. Ming Ming also picked up a fried fish excitedly. "Finally, I don't have to pay attention to my figure anymore. That's great. I'll eat too." Chi-Yu bitterly smiled and said, "I'm so pitiful. My wallet." At this time, Chi-Yu's face suddenly changed. He suddenly pulled Yamu's chair and pulled her delicate body into his arms. Yamu's fried fish was still in her mouth. With a bang, the ground where Yamu was originally at had a deep pit with a diameter of about 2 inches. Ming Ming's eyes flashed. She locked on to the top of a building nearby and looked at it. Chi-Yu used his body to protect Yamu. At this time, another sniper bullet came instantly. This time, Chi-Yu didn't dodge. He coldly snorted, and an invisible wind quietly appeared around his body. Under the influence of the wind, the bullet stuck close to Yamu's body and fell to the ground. Ming Ming was just about to rush out, but she was stopped by Chi-Yu. "Let's go. It seems that the show is about to start." As he said that, he hugged Yamu in his arms and quickly flashed into the shop next to them. Jack blew the smoke from the sniper's muzzle and cursed. In his heart, he was secretly surprised. What a sharp reaction. Could it be that this man can predict danger? Just as he was puzzled, he suddenly realized that the air around his body seemed to solidify, and it was extremely difficult to turn around. The next moment, the air became an invisible killer. A bright red had already appeared on his neck. Jack's eyes widened, and his tall body unwillingly fell to the ground. Until the moment before his consciousness completely disappeared, he didn't know how he died. Chi-Yu, who entered the shop, revealed a trace of cold light in his eyes. "Want to touch my woman? You will have to pay the price." Yamu's expression was very calm. She didn't panic because of the attack just now. She smiled and said to Chi-Yu, "Thank you." Chi-Yu frowned and said, "So fast. Seems like there really was a problem with those Constellation Guardians. There was actually an assassin sneak attack." Yamu took out a piece of tissue from her pocket and wiped her pink and white face. She removed the oil stains from the fried fish. "Seems like my judgment was right. I'm afraid this is just the beginning. According to what I know, in the assassin world, those who use sniper rifles are all low-level assassins. The real assassins don't use firearms." Chi-Yu smiled and said, "Then are you afraid? If you are afraid, then return to the Kirin Pearl. It is absolutely safe there. Unless I die, no one can hurt you." Yamu smiled and shook her head. "No, I want to see how you protect me." Chi-Yu pulled Yamu's hand and said, "Let's go." The 2 shots just now must have attracted the attention of the passers-by. "I'm afraid the police are coming." The 3 of them quietly walked out of the shop and boarded a taxi. They headed in the other direction of London. It was just like what Yamu had said. The attack was just the beginning. "Driver, where are you taking the car? We are not going there. You are going the wrong way." Ming Ming reprimanded the driver in English. The driver was a skinny guy with messy blonde hair. He turned his head and smiled at Ming Ming. I'm not going the wrong way. This is a road to hell. Chi Yu smiled indifferently and said, Since you are going to hell, then we will not accompany you. Under the driver's surprised gaze, Chi Yu and the other two disappeared into thin air. In the next moment, the taxi exploded violently. Standing at the corner of the street, looking at the panicking crowd, Ming Ming said in surprise, How did you find out? Chi Yu smiled and said, Isn't it easy? As soon as I got in the car, my spiritual power discovered the change in the driver. He really thought that we would be fooled. But who do you think I am? As he spoke, he opened his right hand and more than 10 blue steel needles appeared in his hand. These were on our seats just now. I confiscated them when I got in the car first. If my guess is correct, there should be anesthetic poison on them. The driver probably thought that we were already anesthetized, so he drove the car in another direction. Unfortunately, when I got in the car, I noticed the change in his aura and paid special attention to it. These killers are really annoying. Although they are not a real threat, they are like toads that have landed on our feet. They do not bite, but they are very disgusting. Yamu sighed and said, It seems that we will not be able to move an inch in London. Chi Yu smiled and said, Not necessarily. At least, there is a place that is temporarily safe. Where? Yamu and Ming Ming asked in unison. Chi Yu pointed to a tall building in front and said with a smile, That's it. Following the direction of his finger, Yamu and Ming Ming saw the sign of a cross. Church? Are you religious? Yamu asked curiously. Chi Yu laughed and said, Do you believe? Ming Ming laughed and said, Sure. One of you is Kirin, and the other is Goddess Athena, but you have to rely on the protection of a church. If this gets out, I am afraid people will die of laughter. Chi Yu smiled and said, We are just borrowing this place to rest for a while. When night falls, we will look for Klinsman. I do not believe that there are killers who dare to kill people in the Dracula family's castle. If that is the case, it will be even more interesting. As he spoke, he waved his right hand and the steel needle in his hand disappeared. Within a radius of 300 meters from where they were, more than 10 people of different appearances had quietly fallen. Listening to the ear-piercing sirens of the London police cars, Chi Yu held Ming Ming with one hand and Yamu with the other as they walked into the church. London was a city of high status in the West, and the scale of the church here was also much larger than other cities. As soon as they entered the church, they saw many people worshipping devoutly or reading the Bible in a low voice. Chi Yu took the two women to a corner and sat down. He was a little surprised to find that the cross hanging on the innermost part of the church had a faint energy fluctuation. Yamu said, This church is not the largest church in London. One of the most famous places in London is St. Paul's Cathedral. That is the central cathedral of London. A red-robed archbishop was in charge of it. It is one of the most famous places in the entire Vatican. With St. Paul's Cathedral as the center, there are 4 smaller churches in London. This should be one of them. It should be run by a cardinal. Don't underestimate a cardinal. There is only a difference of one word between a cardinal and a cardinal, but the difference in status in the Vatican is huge. The cardinal's power in the Vatican is second only to the Pope. Even the Inquisition is very respectful to them. Chi Yu snorted coldly and said, I haven't settled the score with the Vatican in Yanhuang. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have to use the ultimate Kirin arm. Since I'm in the West this time, I should pay a visit to His Highness the Pope if I have the chance. Yamu, your Greece is also in the West. How much do you know about the Pope, and how strong is he? Yamu said, In terms of individual ability, the Pope can't compare to us at all. However, in terms of overall strength, I'm afraid we can't compare to him. Chi Yu was shocked. From what Yamu said, the Pope's strength was actually above the two of them. This was a little hard for him to believe. Yamu said, I have seen the Pope once in Vatican. The current Pope is already very old. His overall strength can be described as unfathomable. The Pope, or the Vatican, the most powerful ability is to use the energy fluctuations of himself as the center to ask for help from God to obtain great strength. Generally speaking, the Pope can summon archangels to help him in battle. In the Vatican's belief, archangels are equivalent to the existence of God. Although they are different from the gods in our Greek mythology, they are also very powerful. I think with our current strength, we still have a chance to face one archangel alone. If there are two, it will be very difficult. Ming Ming said in shock. It can't be, the Vatican is actually so powerful? But those fellows who came to our Yen Huang Republic last time weren't that great. Yama smiled and said, the strongest that came to the Yen Huang Republic last time was only a cardinal, and the one who claimed to be a cardinal was only a cardinal. If there were really 5 cardinals, whose positions are higher than cardinal, that monster wouldn't be able to do anything no matter how powerful it is. The real strength of the Vatican is still the Pope and the cardinals. The 4 cardinals each have the ability to summon an archangel. But the Pope can summon 2 archangels. Chi Yu said doubtfully. Then the one that came to Yen Huang last time was only a cardinal, and not a cardinal? But didn't they say that there were only 2 cardinals? In terms of numbers, it seems that the cardinal bishops are stronger. Yama shook her head and said, no, that's not it. The cardinals are close to the Pope, and can be said to be under the Pope's command. That's why their positions are higher than the cardinals. But compared to the red-robed archbishops that you Yen Huang people speak of, the cardinal bishops are much weaker in terms of strength and status. Originally, I found it strange as well. I thought that the Vatican would at least send 1 cardinal. But later I found out that the Temple of Darkness and the Vatican were locked in a fierce battle, and the Vatican couldn't deploy more powerful forces. Chi Yu, although we are not weak. But don't underestimate the Vatican and the Temple of Darkness. The 2 of them had been constantly fighting for thousands of years. So in terms of battle strength, they are very strong. If not for their mutual restraint, the Vatican's tentacles would have long spread to your Yen Huang Republic. Chi Yu was secretly shocked. If it was as Yamu said, the Vatican actually had 5 people with similar strength to him and Yamu. If that was the case, the Vatican's strength was too terrifying. Yama said, you don't have to be too nervous. Although the Vatican was powerful, their strongest experts were in different countries after all. It's hard to gather their strength. The archangels are indeed very strong. But my evaluation of their strength just now is, that is when we don't use our divine treasures. With your Xianyuan sword, you should be able to fight against the Pope. But the Pope has many other powerful moves, so in terms of overall strength, he should be stronger than you. As for me, I can only fight against him after I completely merge the 3 divine treasures. I think your strength should have a lot of room for improvement. Chi Yu nodded. What about the Dark Parliament? Although they have always been suppressed by the Vatican, they shouldn't be too far behind. Yamu said, the Dark Parliament is very mysterious. I only know a little about it. The Dark Parliament is made up of many large families. The Klinsman you met is one of the 13 members of the Dark Parliament. On the surface, he has a high position in the Dark Parliament. But in reality, his strength is only average. It's because he has the highest chance of becoming the peak blood emperor that he can sit in his current position. And the Dark Parliament is the strongest. It's the chairman of the Dark Parliament and the experts of his own race. Do you remember the disaster I told you about? When the disaster comes, it's the easiest place to get benefit. I'm afraid it's the Dark Parliament. When that time comes, the Dark Parliament's strength will increase greatly. The Vatican won't be able to fight against them. That's why I want to work with your Zodiac guardian god. If it's possible, it's better for you to coordinate with the Vatican. Chi Yu said indifferently, that's impossible. The Vatican's actions left a deep impression on me. We'll talk about this later. At this time, a priest walked towards the 3 of them. He held a Bible in his hands, looking somewhat holy. His gaze first fell on Ming Ming. When he looked at Ming Ming with his murky eyes, Chi Yu's spiritual power immediately felt a reaction from this guy's body. "Sir, and these two ladies, are you believers?" Although he was talking to the three of them, his gaze was fixed on Ming Ming's face. Chi Yu frowned slightly. This was the so-called priest. From the looks of it, this fellow was simply a wolf in sheep's clothing. If not for his spiritual power being extremely sensitive to human auras, he really would have been fooled. "We're not believers. We're just here to visit the church to see if there's a possibility of becoming believers," Chi Yu said. There was a trace of pity in the priest's eyes. "Poor child. The Lord will guide you on the most correct path. Since that's the case, please follow me. Miss, why don't you go first? I think the bishop will be very honored to baptize an Easterner." Looking at the priest's gaze, even Ming Ming felt that something was wrong. She said indifferently, "No need, thank you for your kindness. We're just here to visit." The priest was about to say something else when suddenly, the church's glass shattered. Then, a smoke bomb was thrown in from outside and landed right in the middle of the church. The smoke instantly filled the air, causing the surrounding people to cough. The appearance of the smoke bomb also caused the believers in the church to panic. For a moment, the scene became much noisier. The priest said angrily, "This is blasphemy against God. Who is it?" As he said that, he didn't care what else he said to Chi Yu and the others. He walked straight out of the church. Chi Yu looked at the two girls in shock. It couldn't be. There was really someone who dared to come to the church and attack them? That was a little too daring. One must know that in the entire Western world, the Vatican's position was definitely decisive. A silver light flashed in Chi Yu's eyes, and the fluctuation of his spiritual power quickly spread out. However, to his surprise, his spiritual power didn't detect any murderous aura. The police outside were still dealing with the taxi that exploded earlier. At this time, the smoke in the church was getting stronger. It wasn't an ordinary smoke bomb, it was tear gas. Amidst the intense coughing, the believers were quickly retreating outside. Chi Yu's heart skipped a beat and he said, "Looks like they're forcing us to go out. Alright, then let's go out and watch the show." Kiran's dark red light lit up. Affected by Kiran's hidden energy aura, the huge cross hanging in the church also released a milky white light at the same time. At this time, the figures of Chi Yu and the others had quietly disappeared. It was invisibility. The three of them left the church in the crowded crowd. Chi Yu saw at a glance that the priest was communicating with the London police. His spiritual power spread out. The conversation between the two sides immediately fell into his ears. Hearing their conversation, Chi Yu's expression couldn't help but change. He also knew the source of the tear gas. The tear gas was shot into the church by mistake by the police. But, was it really an accident? Could it be such a coincidence? Assassins were indeed resourceful. Even the police could be used. This time, Chi Yu was a little excited. He knew that the assassin before him was definitely an expert. He didn't know if it was just one or several assassins. Just from the fact that he could completely conceal his aura and not be detected by spiritual power. He could also use the tear gas released by the police to see. This assassin was already very strong. In fact, Chi Yu and the others didn't know that because this task was taken by many parties, the assassins were in a lot of pain. In order to be the first to complete the task, they had to take the risk to find Chi Yu and the others as soon as possible and attack, in order to avoid being beaten by their peers. So, Chi Yu could get rid of so many assassins in such a short time. How could he lure the assassin out? With such a person in the dark, it was always a threat. After all, Yama's current body was very fragile. Once the opponent seized the opportunity, what if he succeeded? Thinking of this, Chi Yu suddenly thought of a good way to solve the problem in front of him. After discussing with Yamu and Ming Ming, he quietly put the two girls into the Kirin Pearl. Then, he quietly returned to the church. When Chi Yu walked out of the church again, He also brought Ming Ming and Yum with him. His movements were very calm, as if he didn't realize the danger around him. Soon, Chi-Yu walked outside. At this moment, the surrounding crowd suddenly became crowded, and the fire truck drove over from the far end of the street. Because of the crowd, it was inevitable that there would be physical contact. Suddenly, Chi-Yu felt a sharp energy piercing his neck. Smart, what a smart assassin! It seemed that this guy knew very well that if he wanted to kill Yamu, he had to get rid of him first. Such a smart opponent was indeed good. Unfortunately, he met Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu tilted his head slightly. When he looked in the direction of the attack, he only saw the chaotic crowd. It was still crowded, and Yamu and Ming Ming's bodies had been pushed away from Chi-Yu. Soon, they were drowned in the crowd. At this moment, because of the appearance of the fire truck, the scene became even more chaotic. A strange light flashed in Chi-Yu's eyes. He didn't look for Yamu and Ming Ming, but quietly hid in the crowd. An inconspicuous van was speeding on the highway in the suburbs of London. In the driver's seat, an ordinary-looking middle-aged man in his 40s was driving his car carefully. However, his eyes didn't look ordinary. A faint light flickered in his eyes, as if he was thinking about something. At this moment, a lazy voice suddenly rang out in the driver's seat without warning. "Do you think that the mission was completed too easily?" The driver's face changed instantly when he heard the piercing sound of the brakes. He suddenly saw that there was an extra person in the passenger seat. Instinctively, he pressed his hand on the driver's seat. Suddenly, there was a burst of fire, followed by a deafening bang. At least 10 bullets were shot at the person at the same time. A green light quietly lit up, and the 10 bullets stopped an inch away from Chi-Yu's body. Chi-Yu said mockingly, "What, do you want to destroy my clothes? Then you'll have to accompany me. You can't buy good clothes like mine in London." The van had already stopped on the shoulder of the highway. The driver's cold eyes revealed a trace of cruel light. The next moment, a black claw shadow had already reached Chi-Yu's face. Chi-Yu snorted coldly and said, "You want to fight? Then come." He punched out with his right fist, straight at the opponent's claw shadow. The black claw shadow suddenly changed, and the extremely explosive attack actually changed direction in an instant. A crystal-cold light appeared at the tip of the claw shadow, and a sharp blade had already bypassed Chi-Yu's fist, directly slashing at his neck. The cold light flashed in the air, and actually changed direction 5 times in an instant. The illusory movements were enough to dazzle people. Ding! The blade shattered. Chi-Yu's fingers seemed to have been waiting there all along. Based on the judgment of his mental strength, how could he give the opponent a chance? He hurriedly stretched out his right hand and also punched. This time, his speed was no longer visible to the naked eye. An ear-piercing and terrifying sound of bones breaking rang out, and the driver's right arm had completely turned into powder. Chi-Yu's punch had bombarded the driver's shoulder. However, this driver was obviously not an ordinary person. He did not even make a sound when he suffered such a serious injury. His body violently retreated, and actually directly crashed out of the window. His incomparably nimble body flipped, and was already on the roof of the car. Then, without the slightest hesitation, facing Chi-Yu, he did not even have a trace of a fluke in his heart, and rushed to the side of the forest at the speed of lightning. It turned out that when Chi-Yu returned to the church and came out again, he was no longer accompanied by Ming Ming and Yamu, but a physical illusion formed by the mimicry ability of the Qian-Ji realm technique. This ability was only comprehended after he went to the Kunlun illusory realm. From then on, he did not only comprehend the mysteries left behind by Wenting's father, but also began to inject his own things into the Qian-Ji realm technique. In this way, this special realm was developing in a more and more mature direction. "Run? Where do you think you're going?" The lazy voice rang out again like a nightmare, and Chi-Yu's body appeared again, but this time, he appeared in front of the driver's escape route. The driver's skills were indeed outstanding, and he actually leaped in the forest like an ape. However, Could his skills compare to teleportation? The driver panted heavily, and his eyes had already turned blood red. Get out of the way. Chiyu snorted coldly and said, Why, are you going to show your true skills? Let me guess. You must have a high status in the world of assassins. I think the mission to kill my wife should have been issued not long ago. You were able to find us in such a short time, and your arrangements were so seamless, so you're obviously very experienced. It's just that you didn't expect to succeed so easily. Am I right? I'm really sorry to have caused many of your original plans to fail. I wonder how much my Yumu is worth in the market now? Can you tell me? Chapter 191. The ripping sound sounded a little strange. The driver's clothes were completely torn, and his muscles were expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. Fine black hair also appeared at the same time. Chiyu did not take this opportunity to attack, because he saw the wings on the driver's back. There was a hint of joy in his eyes, and he smiled. It's really a case of wearing out iron shoes in fruitless search, only to find it by chance. Just nice, it saves me the trouble of looking for it again. A vampire who could appear in the daytime, was definitely not a low-level vampire. Chiyu did not believe that this guy did not know the location of the Dracula family's castle. After the transformation, the driver's aura was obviously different. His blood-red eyes stared at Chiyu. Whether it was speed or strength, he was raised to the peak. The wings on his back flapped, and his strong body slammed into Chiyu. A layer of dark air instantly filled the sky above him, and Chiyu like a dark cloud. After all, 4 vampires moving in the daytime was still very limited. You should be a marquis, Chiyu said faintly as he floated backward. The driver saw that Chiyu was not surprised to see him, and even said his rank immediately. He was even more shocked, and in his panic, he immediately launched a storm-like attack at Chiyu. Chiyu floated up and quietly floated in the air. His right hand was behind his back, while his left hand was placed in front of his chest. The Qilin mirror had silently appeared, and as his left hand moved like a dream, it protected his body so that not even a drop of water could leak through. As the light flashed, the surging energy affected the surrounding trees, and for a moment, the dense branches and leaves were suddenly eroded by the corrosive dark energy. Chiyu frowned slightly and said, It's not good to destroy the environment. Since you destroyed them, let them take revenge. Let them take revenge on their own. Before the driver could react, Chiyu's body disappeared again, and this time, the fear in his heart was ignited to the peak. Who is this Easterner? Why does he have such a powerful ability? In the face of his attack, he actually dealt with it so casually. Driver wasn't an idiot. He was definitely within the top 20 assassins in the world. He immediately made the most correct judgment in his heart. The wings on his back flapped fiercely. He no longer cared about flying in the air and being affected by the sunlight. He flew high up into the sky as fast as he could. Vampires were very good at flying, and they were dark creatures that excelled in speed. Unfortunately, his opponent this time was Chiyu. When he spread the bat wings on his back and quickly flew into the air, the surrounding trees suddenly moved. Another layer of dark clouds appeared in the sky. This time, it was formed by branches and leaves. He did not know when, but all the trees in the forest were growing rapidly, and the branches and leaves had already formed a huge cage, trapping him inside. No. As he roared, Driver swung his claws. 10 streams of black air condensed into sharp blades and tore at the branches above. However, the branches and leaves were completely different from before. The branches exuded a faint brown aura, and the leaves were as green as emeralds, as if they were about to drip juice. The 10 streams of dark energy did not produce the expected corrosive effect. They only lifted the branches and leaves a few meters above the ground. But then, the branches and leaves bounced back down. As the branches and leaves grew rapidly, the branches became as thick as an arm. Countless green leaves gradually darkened the surrounding space, blocking the sun's rays. It's time to end this. Chi Yu's voice came into Driver's ears without warning. The huge tremor of his spiritual energy almost caused him to lose control of his body. Then, countless branches and leaves swept up. When he was about to unleash his energy, a tyrannical spiritual energy instantly entered his body from the branches and leaves. He felt dizzy, and he could not condense his own dark energy. His whole body was immediately entangled by the branches and leaves, turning him into a big dumpling. The dumpling fell to the ground, and Chi Yu happened to be standing in front of it. Looking at the result in front of him, Chi Yu could not help but nod in satisfaction. He muttered to himself, "Not bad. It seems that my control over plants can be used in actual combat." A green light flashed, and the top branches and leaves of the dumpling opened up, revealing Driver's head. Looking at his pale face with fangs, Chi Yu squatted down and said, "Answer a few questions for me. I can consider letting you go." The driver cursed in English. This was not something that Chi Yu could understand. Frowning, Chi Yu released Ming Ming and Yamu from the Kirin orb. "Ming Ming, what did this guy say?" Ming Ming smiled and said, "A simple explanation. He said that he wouldn't say anything even if you beat him to death." Chi Yu suddenly said, "I see. All right then. Tell him that I won't send him to the Vatican because I hate people from the Vatican. However, I don't mind enforcing the law on behalf of the Vatican." As he spoke, he stretched out his right hand. Suddenly, a ball of fiery red flames appeared. As the temperature continued to rise, the Kirin true fire turned blue in an instant. It looked like a burning ghost. Ming Ming translated Chi Yu's words, and the fear in Driver's eyes increased. His eyes stared unblinkingly at the dancing flames in Chi Yu's hand, and he said something with difficulty. Ming Ming said to Chi Yu, he said, "How can you guarantee that you won't kill him?" Chi Yu said, "It's very simple. Tell him that I am Klinsmann's friend. This time I came to find Klinsmann. As long as he tells me the geographical location of the Dracula family's ancient castle, I will take him with me. When we get there, I will naturally let him go." Ming Ming translated according to Chi Yu's words. The vampire still looked confused. Obviously, he didn't believe Chi Yu's words. Chi Yu's eyes flashed coldly. "I don't have time to waste with you. I think there should be a lot of vampires in London. If you don't tell me, I can find someone else to ask. I don't have that much patience. So what if I'm lying to you? If you don't tell me, I will make sure that you will never be able to reincarnate." This time, after listening to Ming Ming's translation, the driver obviously gave in. He nodded, indicating that he was willing to cooperate. Chi Yu said angrily, "What a cheap bastard. He didn't listen to me and just had to make me threaten him." The flame in his hand extinguished, and he asked, "Tell me your name." "Silva." Ming Ming translated the vampire's answer. "Don't you vampires always think that your bloodline is noble? Why did you become an assassin?" Chi Yu asked. Silva said, "We vampires are also divided into many families. Each family has a different way of making a living. I belong to a relatively small Norman family. Our family's main source of income comes from assassinations. That's the only way. Only then can we maintain our family's various expenses." Chi Yu said, "Okay, I'm not interested in the rest. Don't worry, I mean what I say. Take me to Klinsmann's ancient castle now. Don't try anything funny. Otherwise, I don't mind destroying you like stepping on an ant." They got back into the truck. The driver was still Silva, but this time, he was in a much more sorry state. With a cowardly look, he drove toward the outskirts of London. Chi Yu wasn't afraid of him playing tricks. He had already used Thundercloud Force to seal Silva's dark energy. At the same time, he used his Thundercloud Force to form a layer of protection on the surface of Silva's body to resist the sunlight. If he dared to play any tricks, Chi Yu only needed to remove this layer of protection. Then, Silva's body would be swallowed by the sunlight the next moment. For safety reasons, Chi Yu didn't let Yamu and Ming Ming sit in the back of the truck. Instead, he put them into his Kirin Pearl again. This way, he didn't need to be distracted. Through his conversation with Silva, Chi Yu learned the figure of $100 million. As for who had commissioned it, even Silva himself didn't know. The identity of the employer wouldn't be revealed when the assassination message was sent through the underground world. This was also an unspoken rule in the Western assassin world. Silva told Chi Yu that there were many people who had accepted this mission. They came from all over the world, and the top 10 assassins in the world should have arrived in London. It was just that they had temporarily lost track of Chi Yu, so they were safe for the time being. London was a very large city, and its suburbs were also very vast. By the time Silva drove Chi Yu to a hill in the suburbs, the sun was already slowly setting in the west. "Is this the place?" Chi Yu asked Silva, who had stopped the car. He directly transmitted his thoughts into Silva's mind through his mental power. Therefore, although he couldn't understand Silva's words, Silva could understand what he meant. Silva nodded, indicating that they had arrived at their destination. Chi Yu gave him a look, and the two got out of the truck. Looking at the forest in front of him, Chi Yu couldn't help but frown. There wasn't any castle here. It was clearly a small village in the suburbs of London. The trees were lush, and the environment was not bad. Silva nodded to Chi Yu again, indicating that it was the right place. In order to understand him, Chi Yu had to summon Ming Ming. After Silva's explanation, he found out that the Dracula family's castle was shrouded in a special domain. It couldn't be seen. Only by entering this domain could one see the real Dracula castle. The Dracula family was a pure-blooded vampire family, and also the oldest family. The strength they possessed could be counted in the entire Dark Parliament. The Dracula family's castle in London was the family's most important place. As for how this special domain was formed, Silva didn't know. Since he wasn't a member of the Dracula family, he naturally didn't know how to enter this domain. "He asked you if you can let him go now," Ming Ming said to Chi Yu. Chi Yu snorted and said, "Let him go? Isn't that obviously telling the assassins where we are? We can't let this guy go yet. Isn't Klinsmann a prince of the blood kindred? He's also the head of the entire blood kindred. Let him handle this." As he spoke, Chi Yu waved his right hand, and a gust of thundercloud force with a faint green light landed on Silva's body. With a muffled groan, Silva fainted on the ground. Looking at the surrounding forest, Chi Yu pondered for a moment before sitting cross-legged on the ground. Since it was a domain, there would definitely be an entrance. It didn't matter if he couldn't find the door, he could just knock on it. Thinking of this, the corners of Chi Yu's mouth curled up into a smirk. He thought to himself, "Klinsmann, don't blame me. Who asked you to not tell me how to enter? I'll give you some gifts first." Purple light gradually appeared around his body, completely dyeing Chi Yu's simple jeans and white t-shirt purple. The faint light continued to rise. Chi Yu put his palms together in front of his chest, and his eyes had already turned silver. Ming Ming stood at the side and looked at Chi Yu quietly. Feeling the energy aura released from his body, she thought to herself, "Chi Yu is getting stronger and stronger. It seems like I have to work hard too. Be it Ryu or Wen Ting, they are much stronger than me, not to mention Yum. They could all help Chi Yu, but what about her? She was still far from it." While Ming Ming was letting her imagination run wild, Chi Yu had already made his move. Lin Bing Do Zhe. 4 sonorous and powerful voices came out of Chi Yu's mouth. The purple light surged and had already wrapped his body so that only a faint shadow could be seen. Suddenly, the purple light shot up into the sky and disappeared in midair. The purple light around Chi Yu's body also disappeared, but his eyes were still silver. The originally clear sky began to change, at the same time the purple light disappeared. Large patches of dark clouds appeared without warning, covering an area of about 1 square kilometer. It happened to completely cover the forest in front of Chi Yu. Under the cover of the dark clouds, the sky suddenly became dark. A bright and beautiful bolt of lightning streaked across the sky, followed by the sound of rolling thunder. As the lightning continued to flash, the sound of thunder caused the earth to tremble. The intense rumbling was filled with explosive energy. Chi Yu's silver eyes stared at the sky. He slowly raised his right hand. With a flash of light, Kirin turned into an ancient longsword in his hand. With a low shout, he pointed the longsword in his hand. Suddenly, a purple light floated down and bombarded the forest with a loud sound. The energy in the air suddenly became chaotic because of the sudden appearance of the thunder. Kirin Lightning Guiding Formation was the special ability of the thundercloud force that Chi Yu comprehended after he reached 6 cloud. Compared to Kirin's 100 lightning strikes, the scale of this formation was far smaller than Kirin's 100 lightning strike. However, the power of Kirin's 100 lightning strikes was much greater than Kirin's 100 lightning strike. Kirin's 100 lightning strikes attacked indiscriminately within a certain range. Because the energy of the lightning was extremely large, it was very difficult to control. However, Kirin's lightning guiding formation was different. Under Chi Yu's control, it could strike wherever he pointed. Using the sword to guide the formation was only because he wanted to save some energy. In battle, Chi Yu only needed to activate this formation and he would be able to unleash his full strength while using his mental power to control the lightning in the sky to bombard his opponent. Kirin's lightning guiding formation could only be comprehended when one reached 7 clouds. The main reason was that it had too high of a mental power requirement. Each attack could be controlled by mental power to strike different amounts of lightning, and the attack power of the lightning was far greater than Kirin's 100 lightning strike. After Chi Yu became the origin of nature, the strength of his mental power naturally wouldn't have any problems. He pointed the sword in his hand at Qianlian. A few consecutive lightning strikes descended from the sky. Amidst the violent roars, the disorder of the energy molecules became more and more intense. Chi Yu specifically looked for some empty space to strike. Some of the lightning strikes even exploded in midair. Don't you have the protection of the domain? The domain also needs energy to be maintained. I've messed up the energy here. Let's see if you can come out or not. From the beginning, there was only one lightning strike. Gradually, there were more and more lightning strikes. Purple snakes of lightning flickered in midair. It was a completely strange scene. The lightning strikes. Very quickly it took effect. Due to the change in the energy molecules in the air, Chi Yu's mental power that was scattered in the surroundings immediately felt circles of energy fluctuations appear under the explosions of the lightning. It seemed to be a defensive energy. The evil aura kept trembling under the influence of the heavenly lightning's righteousness. Just as Chi Yu was about to increase his strength and let the lightning strike 100 times in a row, suddenly, a blood-red pillar of light appeared without warning. The blood-red pillar of light with a diameter of 1 meter soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, it rushed into midair. The pillar of light seemed to have a physical form. As soon as it entered the dark clouds, it immediately stirred up quickly. Obviously, it wanted to destroy the thundercloud that Chi Yu had condensed. Chi Yu grabbed Silva and signaled to Mingming with his eyes to stop controlling the thunderclouds. He no longer controlled the thundercloud and directly pounced toward the place where the blood-red pillar of light appeared. "Klinsman, come out!" Chi Yu shouted. With the help of the thundercloud force, the sound waves floated in the direction of the blood-red pillar of light. "Who dares to shout my name?" Klinsman's somewhat angry voice sounded. With a flash of light, dozens of black figures appeared in midair, spreading their huge wings. It was like a small dark cloud. Klinsman's elegant figure was in the center. His blood-red wings were extremely eye-catching. He even held a glass in his hand. He shook it gently, letting the blood in it move slightly. Chi Yu laughed and said, "Why, don't you recognize your old friend? What's wrong? You don't even recognize your old friend?" As he spoke, he released his control over the thunderclouds, and the dark clouds in the air immediately dissipated. He floated up and appeared in front of Klinsman in the blink of an eye. Seeing Chi Yu, Klinsman could not help but be surprised. He immediately greeted him excitedly and enthusiastically, Chi, how come it's you? When did you come to London? Chi smiled and said, What's wrong? Am I not welcome? It seems that I'm really lucky that you're here. Sorry, because I couldn't find the door, I could only use the lightning to open the way. Klinsmann looked up at the sky and then at Chi. Oh my God! Chi, did you do that just now? Chi chuckled and said, It's me. Klinsmann smiled bitterly and patted his chest. I thought that God really wanted to punish us, the Blood Clan. I haven't seen you for half a year, and you've become even stronger. But you almost scared me to death. Why are you here? Hey, you seem to be carrying my clansman in your hand. Chi threw Silva to Klinsmann. If it wasn't for him leading the way, I wouldn't have found this place. Let's go. Aren't you going to invite me to your castle? The Dracula family's ancient castle was only able to stand tall in the suburbs of London because of the special domain that the ancestors of the blood breeds worked hard to build. The church had searched for it many times, but they had never been able to find its exact location, much less enter it. The entire castle was shrouded in the domain. It was pitch black everywhere, and only the moon in the domain could bring some light to the castle. When Chi and Ming Ming entered the domain under Klinsmann's lead, they immediately felt a gust of gloomy aura. Everything around them was gloomy. Looking at the pale-faced vampires with their fangs bared, Ming Ming could not help but stick to Chi in fear, and her palms began to sweat. Klinsmann dismissed his subordinates and led the two into his castle. This castle was very similar to the one Chi had seen in the movies before, but it was not as big as he imagined it to be. Inside the castle, there was darkness and evil everywhere. The vampires maintained their original forms, and they looked indescribable. Klinsmann led Chi and Ming Ming into the hall, walked to the master's seat, and sat down. He said elegantly, I'm very happy that you can come to our Dracula castle as guests. In the words of your Yen Huang people, what brings you two distinguished guests here? Chi smiled and said, All right, don't put on your gentlemanly demeanor. We came to find you to seek refuge. Don't you know that someone is hunting us? Klinsmann was stunned. Someone is hunting you? Dear Chi, don't joke with me. In this city of London, there is probably no one but the Cardinal who can pose a threat to you. Chi smiled faintly and said, You can ask the fellow I gave you earlier and you'll understand. Klinsmann saw that Chi was serious, so he asked his subordinates to wake Silva up and asked him carefully. After listening to Silva's words, Klinsmann's expression changed. Chi, when did you get involved in this? However, Silva said that there should be 3 of you, and the real target is a woman. Chi sat comfortably on the sofa and said, For her safety, I had her hide for the time being. Although the atmosphere of this ancient castle was not very good, the buildings inside the ancient castle were filled with a kind of classical beauty. Even Chi, who did not understand art, could not help but admire it. They all felt that it was worth appreciating. A cold light flashed in Klinsmann's eyes. Chi, I'm afraid you've stirred up quite a bit of trouble this time. 100 million USD. That was not a small sum. It was likely that many assassins had already gathered in London. I've also heard of this news, and I've even sent people to investigate. However, with your strength, you shouldn't be afraid of these assassins, right? Chi said, I'll be frank. I'm not here to avoid being hunted down. So what if there were twice as many assassins? What can they do to me? The main reason I'm here is to make a deal with you. Klinsmann was stunned and said, A deal? What deal? Although he was a member of the Dark Council, although he was a member of the Dark Parliament, last time in Dali, if it weren't for Chi, he would have died a long time ago. That was why he was so enthusiastic when he suddenly saw Chi this time. Just because he belonged to the dark world didn't mean that he would not be grateful. Chi looked at him deeply and said, I want to ask you for a favor. Tell me some information, and I will give you something in exchange. Klinsmann said with some dissatisfaction, Chi, what do you mean? Don't you treat me as a friend? Chi was stunned and said, How could I? If I didn't treat you as a friend, I wouldn't have helped you in the first place. Klinsmann snorted and said, Since you treat me as a friend, why are you talking about a deal? Even my life was saved by you. As long as I can help, what do I need from you? Although from your point of view, I'm a member of the dark world, the dark world isn't as hypocritical as the Vatican. Do you want to be temporarily sheltered here? That's not a problem. I might not be able to guarantee it in other places, but as long as you are in my castle, I guarantee that no one can touch a hair on you and your friend. Looking at Chi-Yu, Klinsmann's eyes lit up, and his neatly combed blonde hair seemed to exude a layer of noble aura at this time. Chi-Yu smiled and said, This matter is indeed a bit troublesome, but I don't just want to rely on you for protection. I need your help with something more important. Let's talk in private, okay? Klinsmann nodded and waved his hand. The low-level vampires on both sides immediately retreated, leaving only the three of them in the hall. You can speak now. In this place, I am supreme. No one will eavesdrop. Chi-Yu nodded and said, I want to ask you some information. I wonder if you've heard of the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus? Klinsmann's pale face changed slightly. Emperor Heart Snow Lotus? You're here for the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus? That's a big problem. If you're here for it, I advise you to give up on this idea. Hearing Klinsmann's words, Chi-Yu was not surprised but happy. He hurriedly said, So that means the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus is really in the hands of the Dark World? Klinsmann hesitated for a moment before saying, Chi, do you not understand what I mean? Although the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus is good, it's not as important as your life. Chi-Yu said, Klinsmann, I can tell you frankly that I have to get the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus. No matter how difficult it is, it can't stop me. I hope you can tell me exactly where it is. As for the rest, let me handle it myself. How about that? Klinsmann sighed. Are you Yen Wang people all so stubborn? To be honest, the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus is something that the chairman of the Dark World wants. It wasn't easy to get it. It's now in the headquarters of the Dark World. I'm not afraid to tell you some secrets. The chairman of the Dark World is the great Dark Lich King. Compared to his strength, I'm still far, far away. In terms of age, we vampires should be the oldest in the Dark World. However, our great Mr. President has lived for more than 10,000 years. His strength is even inferior to the Pope. It's because of his existence that the Dark World has always been able to compete with the Vatican. And after the great chairman passed the age of 10,000, there were some problems with his strength. He needed the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus to prolong his life and increase his strength. That was why he went through so much trouble and finally found the whereabouts of the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus. Although he hadn't used the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus yet, one could imagine that the item he valued the most would have the strongest defense. The Vatican had sent people to steal it many times, but they never returned. I know you're very strong, but if you do anything to the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus, then you'll be going against the entire Dark World. Whether you succeed or not, you'll face endless vengeance. So, Chi, I advise you to give up. You won't have a chance. Chi-Yu said calmly, How do I know I won't have a chance if I haven't tried? No matter how strong your chairman is, I'll still give it a try. The Emperor Heart Snow Lotus belongs to Yen Huang. Klinsmann, I can't tell you the details. I just hope you can tell me where he is. Klinsmann's eyes flashed, his sharp gaze seeming to see through Chi-Yu. But he found that Chi-Yu's eyes were so clear, without a trace of impurity. But they were so deep that he couldn't see through them. After hesitating for a moment, he finally made up his mind. Chi, I'm sorry. If it were anything else, I would definitely help you. But I can't tell you where the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus is. If I tell you, it'll be equivalent to betraying the Dark World. At the same time, I don't want you to die. I know you and Christy are good friends. At the same time, I also see you as a friend. I can't harm you. Chi-Yu seemed to have expected Klinsmann's answer. He smiled slightly, and his right hand touched the Kirin bead. A small porcelain bottle appeared in his hand. The moment the bottle appeared, before Chi Yu could say anything, Klinsmann's tall and handsome body suddenly trembled violently. His eyes suddenly released a strong blood-red light. In a flash, he had already teleported in front of Chi Yu. At this moment, all nobility and gentlemanliness were gone. His whole body trembled, and he grabbed the porcelain bottle in Chi Yu's hand. Chapter 192. Klinsmann's body trembled uncontrollably. His blood-red eyes stared fixedly at the porcelain bottle in Chi Yu's hand. What is that? Why do I have such a strong feeling of longing? No, it's impossible, it's impossible. Chi Yu smiled and said, Nothing is impossible. This is a phrase I often say. Klinsmann, I know I shouldn't have asked you to betray the covenant of darkness and tell me the news, but the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus King is too important to me. So, I am willing to exchange it for your information. What do you think? Klinsmann trembled and looked at Chi Yu. You tell me, what is that? Holding the bottle in his palm, Chi Yu faintly smiled and said, You should have felt it. You just didn't dare to believe it. Yes, this is the blood of your vampire ancestor, Cain Dracula. Cain Dracula. Klinsmann was absolutely stunned. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. What did you say? Chi Yu smiled and said, For me, this thing is useless. The blood of your Dracula family's ancestor, Cain, has a different meaning to your family. Are you going to exchange it or not? Yes, even if you ask me to exchange my life for it. Not to mention a piece of good news. Klinsmann couldn't take his eyes off the porcelain bottle. He didn't want to know where Chi Yu got it. As Chi Yu said, Cain's primordial blood was too important to the Dracula family. Exchange your life for it? What's the use of it without your life? Chi Yu threw the porcelain bottle to Klinsmann. Klinsmann was startled. Even with his strength, he was a little flustered when he caught the porcelain bottle. That's great, that's really great. Klinsmann was so excited that he jumped up and down like a child. His excited look reminded him of his childhood. Chi, you don't know. You have no idea how important it is to the Dracula family. You know what? The others in the Dark Council had always thought that I had advanced to the Blood Emperor rank after returning from Yen Huang. However, they were all wrong. Although I had already surpassed the level of a vampire prince, I was still only a blood prince. There was still an unreachable distance between me and a blood emperor. I don't even dare to think that I would have the chance to become a blood emperor in this lifetime. However, it was different with it. One drop. With just one drop, I will definitely be able to reach the blood emperor realm within a year. To us blood clan members, fresh blood is the source of everything. The purer a blood clan member's bloodline, the easier it is to cultivate. This is also why the Dracula family can always be the king of the blood clan. The other vampire families were separated from the Dracula family, and their bloodlines are not as pure as ours. Cain's blood, ancestor Cain's blood. What could be purer than this? Chi, Klinsmann will never forget your kindness to the blood clan and the Dracula family for the rest of his life. Even if you ask me to betray the Dark Council, I won't hesitate. Chi Yu had guessed that Klinsmann would need Cain's primordial blood, but she didn't expect him to be so excited. She smiled and said, Actually, it's not a big deal. Even if you don't agree to exchange with me, I have no intention of taking it back. After all, this thing can only be used in the hands of you blood breeds, and it was originally meant to be given to Chinger. Don't get too carried away. Remember to give some to Chinger later. This is a full bottle, it should be enough for the two of you. Of course, that's enough. With it, even Christy could rise to the same level as me. Chi, I really don't know how to thank you. Klinsmann couldn't recover from his excitement for a while. Right at this moment, a cold yet somewhat delicate voice sounded. Brother, what's making you so excited? You're actually speaking in the language of Yen Huang. Klinsmann quickly said, Christy, come and see who's here. A graceful figure floated down from the staircase on the right side of the hall. Her movements were extremely fast, as if she had suddenly appeared. It was Su Qing. Seeing Su Qing again, the feeling was completely different. At this time, Su Qing no longer had the aura of a former student. She was wearing a fitted black dress that outlined her alluring figure. Her long black hair was quietly draped over her back, and her pale face looked a little cold. Her noble aura set off her alluring and charming face. She had matured. Compared to the immature girl from before, the current Su Qing had a little more charm in her coldness. "Qinger!" Ming Ming shouted excitedly and pounced on her. Su Qing was stunned for a moment. Then, the two women who were once close friends hugged each other tightly. Looking at the two excited women, Chi Yu quietly came to Klinsmann's side and said, "Now you should tell me the whereabouts of the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus King." Klinsmann looked at Chi Yu helplessly, lowered his voice, and said a few words in his ear. Chi Yu nodded repeatedly, and a faint cold light appeared in his eyes. "Okay, thank you very much." Klinsmann gritted his teeth and said, "How about I help you?" Chi Yu looked at him deeply and said, "No need. I will solve my own problems. You don't represent just me, but the Dracula family, and even the entire vampire race. As long as you treat Qinger well, that will be the best way to thank me." At this time, Su Qing and Ming Ming had recovered from the excitement of suddenly meeting. The two walked to Chi Yu and Klinsmann hand in hand. Su Qing looked at Chi Yu, and her pretty face blushed a little. "You're here too." Chi Yu faintly smiled and nodded towards Su Qing. "Long time no see. Have you adapted to the life here?" Su Qing nodded and looked at Klinsmann. "Big brother is very good to me. Everything is fine. I just miss home a little. If you guys didn't come, I was going to go home in a few days. After all, I came out in the name of studying abroad. It's time to go back and see my parents. Did you come to London for a vacation? How long can you stay this time?" Chi Yu said, "I might leave tomorrow. Ming Ming will stay here for a few days." Ming Ming was stunned. Chi Yu said seriously, "I'm going to Germany. You stay here and don't go anywhere." Ming Ming panicked and said, "No, I want to go with you." Of course, she knew what Chi Yu was going to do. Klinsmann had just mentioned how dangerous the Dark Parliament was. How could she feel at ease letting Chi Yu go alone? Chi Yu held Ming Ming's hand and smiled. "Don't worry, I'll be fine. I'll be back in a week at most. If you come with me, I'll have to take care of you. I still have to take care of you. Stay here with Qinger. You two haven't seen each other for a long time. Don't you believe in my strength?" Su Qing asked curiously, "Chi Yu, what are you going to Germany for?" Chi Yu said, "To pick someone up." Just as Chi Yu and Ming Ming arrived at the Dracula family's castle, a special guest came to Divangang. It was a young girl. From her figure, one could tell that she was young. She wore a long white dress that outlined her slender figure. A hat with a white veil covered her face. She walked into the headquarters of the Vatican as if there was no one else around. A priest blocked the girl's way. "I'm sorry, behind you is the Vatican's restricted area. Outsiders are not allowed to enter. Miss, please go back." A soft and pleasant voice came from behind the veil. "Take me to see the Pope." Hearing this voice, the priest's body suddenly trembled, and his originally calm gaze became dazed. He murmured and repeated the girl's words. "See the Pope, see the Pope." He turned around slowly and didn't stop the girl anymore. Instead, he led her inside. They did not go far before they were stopped again. For priests who were in charge of guarding the important grounds of the Vatican blocked their way. "Father Nasman, what are you doing?" The priest said to himself blankly, "To see the Pope." The girl in white behind him repeated, "Yes, to see the Pope." The soft voice came into the ears of the four priests at the same time. Their bodies shook at the same time. Just like the priest, they didn't stop the girl in white and Father Nasman anymore. The same situation happened more than 10 times. The girl was led by the priest to the real core area of the Vatican's headquarters. In the middle of the huge hall hung a milky white cross, which seemed to be carved out of jade. The decorations around it were resplendent, and a strong holy aura constantly emanated from the cross, filling the entire hall. If Chi-Yu was here, he would definitely notice that the holy aura in this unknown hall was no weaker than Athena's Parthenon. The only difference was the nature of the energy. Father Nasman walked to the side and stood there blankly. It seemed like he had lost his soul. The girl in white walked to the middle of the hall and stood under the cross. She said calmly, "Pope." The soft voice produced a special sound wave. With her body as the center, it quickly spread to the surroundings. No object or energy could stop the transmission of her voice. The soft voice carried a special wave and filled the Vatican's headquarters. Not long after, a dignified and old voice came from the end of the hall. The huge arched door at the end slowly opened. "Who are you?" The girl slowly raised her head and looked at the open door through the white veil. She said softly, "I'm looking for help." Pope Malti had short silver-white hair and a red robe with golden edges that covered his not-so-tall body. His aged face was filled with a unique charm, and his clear eyes that didn't look like an old man's were staring at the young girl who was dozens of meters away from him. His entire body exuded a layer of milky white luster, making this pope look even more sacred. Marty slowly walked into the hall. He didn't blame the girl for coming without an invitation. He just said calmly, "Then what kind of help are you looking for, miss?" The girl smiled and said, "Help that will benefit both of us. I think His Highness the Pope won't reject it. Isn't that right?" Marty's old face showed a trace of surprise. "What a special ability! I haven't seen such a powerful spiritual wave in a long time. The Lord said that all delusion is the root of sin. Evil will come to an end." The old voice made Father Simon's body tremble. His dull eyes immediately recovered, and he said in a panic, "Your Highness the Pope, I." Marty smiled and said, "The Lord will forgive you. This isn't your fault. Go." Simon looked at the girl in white with some fear. He quickly left the hall as if he was running away. The girl in white smiled gently and said, "As expected of your Highness the Pope. To be able to remove my spiritual control so easily, I'm afraid you're the only one who can do that. I think you must be eager to know why I'm here. It's very simple. I hope to cooperate with the Holy See." Marty said indifferently, "Before Miss proposes to cooperate, can you first tell me your identity?" The girl in white said, "Of course. Otherwise, how can I gain His Highness the Pope's trust?" Silence. The hall fell into a state of silence, but a clear sound rang in Marty's ears. Surprise reappeared on the Pope's old face. "Oh, so Miss is from Greece. I'm very surprised. Since that's the case, you can now tell me what this cooperation you speak of is." The girl in white said, "It's very simple. Kill Athena." "What?" Even with Pope Marty's composure, he couldn't help but cry out in surprise. The girl in white continued, "I think with your identity, it's impossible that you don't know about the $100 million bounty that appeared in the underground world. That target is the successor of goddess Athena, Greece's Yum. At the same time, her external identity is the chairman of the Athens Shipping Company." Marty's expression changed. He said, "I don't quite understand what Miss means. Since Miss is also from Greece, why do you want to put goddess Athena's successor, Miss Yamu, to death? You should know that the Holy See has always had a good relationship with Greece." The girl in white said indifferently, "The goal is very simple. It's to replace her. I think His Highness the Pope should understand." Marty shook his head. "In the name of the Holy Father, the Holy Son, and the Holy Spirit, I really don't understand what Miss means." The girl in white said, "This involves a secret of Greece. In order to gain your trust, I'm willing to tell you this secret. You'll understand after hearing it." The peaceful conversation turned into a telepathic transmission. The girl in white's narration lasted for a full half an hour. In the process of listening, Pope Marty's expression changed many times. By the time the girl in white finished speaking, his expression had already become very gloomy. "So that's how it is. I understand. I need time to consider, Marty said in a deep voice. The girl in white said, this matter concerns the future of Greece, and at the same time, it has a great impact on the Holy See. I hope that Your Highness the Pope can make a decision soon. According to the information I received, Yamu is currently in the Dracula Castle, the headquarters of the Dark Parliament. Actually, the choice for you is very simple. One is the successor of the Greek god who can completely cooperate with the Holy See, and the other is the successor of the Greek god who might become your enemy. I don't need to explain further, right? Marty sighed. First of all, I sympathize with Mrs.'s situation. I'm also very willing to help you. However, this matter is very serious. If we don't handle it well, it will definitely bring great trouble to the Holy See. At the same time, the Dark Parliament will not let go of this opportunity. So, I need to discuss it with the red-robed archbishops before I can give you an answer. The girl in white said, there's not much time left. If we let Yamu obtain the power of Athena's divine artifact, then everything will be over. Your Highness the Pope, no matter what the situation is within a day, I hope that you can give me an answer. I believe that you can easily find my whereabouts in Vatican. Farewell. Marty didn't ask the girl in white to stay. He allowed her to turn around and leave. His clear eyes suddenly lit up. It was unknown when a scepter had appeared in his hand. The supreme ruler of the Holy See chanted in a low voice, and the originally calm energy aura suddenly fluctuated greatly. Strolling on the streets of Berlin, Chi Yu sorted out his thoughts. It had been an hour since he arrived in Berlin. With the information he got from Klinsmann, he already knew the location of the Dark Parliament's headquarters. However, it was easier said than done to infiltrate the Dark Parliament. However, what made him happy was that Ming Ming finally understood his difficulties and stayed in London after being persuaded. As for Chi Yu, he changed his identity and quietly came to Berlin under Klinsmann's arrangement. At this moment, Chi Yu was wearing a dark blue t-shirt, black trousers, and black leather shoes. His black shoulder-length hair was neatly draped over his shoulders, and he wore a pair of narrow-rimmed sunglasses. If it wasn't for his long hair, he would have looked like the male lead from The Matrix. He strolled around the streets of Berlin for a while, ate some German specialty salted pork knuckles, and drank 2 bottles of German beer. On the surface, he looked like a traveler. In fact, in the process of doing this, Chi Yu had already begun to spread his mind power, almost covering the entire Berlin area, and quickly absorbing the energy molecules in the air to adjust his state to the best. He knew very well that this trip to the Dark Parliament to find the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus King was definitely not going to be an easy task. It was definitely not going to be an easy task. Yamu had already told him very clearly that the Dark Parliament's headquarters was even harder to break into than the Vatican. He waved his hand and hailed a taxi. Chi Yu communicated with Yamu in Kirin's bead, and spoke with difficulty to the driver about his destination in German. Then, he immediately closed his eyes and quietly adjusted the thundercloud force in his body. After finishing everything in Greece, he already had a plan for this trip to Europe. His primary goal was to rescue Snow Girl's father, so he looked for Klinsmann. If it was as he had guessed, the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus was in the hands of the Dark Parliament, so he came to Berlin alone. He let Yamu stay in Kirin's bead, not because he was afraid that Klinsmann would not be safe. Since he promised Yamu that he would protect her, it was naturally the safest to keep her by his side. Yamu had now become the fuse. With her by his side, there would not be any problems on Ming Ming's side. Subconsciously, Chi Yu was still a little wary of Yamu. There was still some distance between his relationship with Ming Ming and him. However, there was one thing that Chi Yu did not expect. When he quietly left London, because of Klinsmann's careful arrangements, the people who were after Yamu did not expect that she had already left London, including the 6 Constellation Guardians. At this time, London had become more and more restless. The taxi sent Chi Yu all the way to the western suburbs of Berlin. After getting out of the car, Qi Yu walked out of the road and used his mental power to feel that there was no one around. Only then did he spread out his body and use Kirin's invisibility ability to hide his body. He quickly flew southwest. 10 minutes later, Qi Yu stopped. With his current speed, flying for 10 minutes had already covered a distance of more than 100 kilometers. In the distance, a strangely shaped hill had already appeared in his sight. In the western suburbs of Berlin there were many such hills, but this one looked a little more special. This was because it was a stone mountain about 200 to 300 meters high. Not only was it abnormally steep, but there was not even a blade of grass growing on it. It looked a little gloomy. Even the Vatican, who had been fighting with the Covenant of Darkness for so many years, did not know where the headquarters of the Covenant of Darkness was. But at this time, Qi Yu had already arrived in front of its door. Activating the thundercloud force in his body, Qi Yu's body shot up to the top of the hill like a rocket. As far as the eye could see, the surrounding area of tens of square kilometers was in his eyes. Qi Yu shouted in his heart, "Covenant of Darkness, I'm coming." From Klinsmann, he knew the specific location of the Covenant of Darkness, but even Klinsmann did not know where the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus King was kept by the Dark Chairman. Therefore, he could only come alone, enter the headquarters of the Covenant of Darkness first, and then slowly search. The reason why the headquarters of the Covenant of Darkness had not been discovered by the Vatican for so many years was that it was hidden too well. The headquarters of the Covenant of Darkness was not located anywhere on Earth, but in a special space, and this space was created by the current Dark Chairman, the Dark Lich King. In 1,000 years, 17 Dark Lich Elders had been sacrificed, and with the help of a huge amount of dark energy, this special world of darkness was created. And the door to this world of darkness was on the top of the hill where Qi Yu was standing. Klinsmann briefly described the scene of the Covenant of Darkness to Qi Yu. It was a completely dark world, without sunlight, full of death and all kinds of negative energy. There were only 2 dark races there. One was the most powerful Dark Lich in the world of darkness, and the other was the loyal servant of the Dark Lich, the Dark Warriors. Klinsmann told Qi Yu that although his position in the Covenant of Darkness was very high, however, the real strength of the Covenant of Darkness was not the Blood Race, nor the Werewolves or the Bearmen. It was the Dark Lich and the Dark Warriors at the headquarters. Among the 13 members of the Covenant of Darkness, the other seats were constantly changing, but only 6 seats never changed. They were the Dark Chairman, the 4 Dark Lich Elders, and the Dark Warrior Emperor. They always maintained the position of the 6 members. The Cardinal who had betrayed the Vatican was able to sit in the position of a member because of his great contribution to the Covenant of Darkness. However, in terms of strength, he was much weaker than the 6 hereditary members led by the Dark Chairman. To enter the headquarters of the Covenant of Darkness, generally speaking, one could only rely on the resonance of one's own dark energy to get the approval of the Dark Lich that guarded the dark space inside. Otherwise, how could one enter if one could not even find the door? Of course, it was impossible for Qi Yu to get the approval of the Dark Lich, but he also had his own way. After disappearing, Qi Yu slowly raised his hands above his head. Golden rays of light burned like flames from his body, and a huge amount of energy condensed. The Xianyuan sword that was more than 2 meters long quietly appeared in Qi Yu's hands under the golden light. The black sword was completely dyed with a huge golden light, and an incomparably sharp aura broke through the air. The sun, moon, and stars on the sword seemed to have come to life, and that tyrannical energy fluctuation was even for the master who held it. Every time Qi Yu mobilized its energy, he would still feel a trace of fear. Unleash your all-conquering power, Xianyuan Godly Sword. The golden light of the sword broke through the air, and at this moment, Qi Yu's body seemed to have become one with the sword. After using the first sword of the Xianyuan 8 swords, one with the world twice, Qi Yu found out that, although it would drain his own energy every time he used it, It also allowed him to better integrate with the Xianyuan sword. The next time he used it, his own energy could better integrate with the Xianyuan sword. No door? Then I'll temporarily create one for you. The Xianyuan sword is known as the most powerful artifact for breaking domains. The signs of the Zodiac domain can even be broken in front of me, let alone a door. Break for me. With a roar, the huge thundercloud force completely transformed into Kirin's purest energy. Driven by the huge spiritual fluctuation, the Xianyuan sword suddenly let out a clear buzzing sound. Holding the sword hilt with both hands, Chi-Yu stood on the cliff of the mountain like Pengu opening the sky, and swung the golden sword down. The air was split into two under the effect of the Xianyuan sword, and the space was also like paper in front of the sharp Xianyuan sword. A black crack appeared in front of Chi-Yu along with the golden light. In the next moment, his body had already turned into a ray of golden light and instantly entered the black crack. As soon as he entered the black crack, the first thing Chi-Yu felt was an incomparably huge pressure instantly squeezing his body from all directions. Fortunately, he was now one with the Xianyuan sword. With the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword, the pressure in front of him would be split into two. Amidst the flickering light, a strong light appeared in Chi-Yu's eyes. The golden light on the Xianyuan sword flashed and disappeared, and under the control of his spiritual power, it was completely restrained. Then, the dark red light of Kirin's hidden covered his body, and the invisibility skill was activated. Countless corrosive energies had already rushed towards Chi-Yu before he went invisible. However, his reaction was still very fast. Kirin's hidden had become his most used Kirin's octatic treasures. His body flashed, and while going invisible, he also used the effect of Kirin's hidden to teleport. In the blink of an eye, he was already 100 meters away. 100 meters was the limit of his teleportation. After evading the pursuit and hiding his body, Chi-Yu could now calm down and observe everything in this dark space. Chapter 193. It was indeed a dark place, but it was not completely devoid of light. A purple sun hung high in the sky, bringing purple light to this dark world. On the black land, a city full of classical aura appeared in front of Chi-Yu. Yes, it was a city. The walls were about 20 meters high and were made of grayish-white stone. The city gate was in the classical style of Europe. There was even a moat outside the walls, but the water was blood-red. The drawbridge was lowered, connecting the city to the land outside. About a kilometer away from the city, there was a layer of black air. That must be the border of this dark world. At the place where he appeared, there were 4 black air currents floating, and there were also 6 soldiers standing on the ground. The 4 black air currents were about 2 meters in diameter. From the black air currents, one could vaguely see the shape of a human. Chi-Yu guessed that this should be the dark lich that Klinsmann had mentioned. The 6 soldiers on the ground surprised him even more. Each of them wore black full-body armor, which emitted a faint purple light under the purple sun. They were about 2.5 meters tall, and each of them held a black heavy sword that was 2 meters long and more than half a foot wide. As they moved, the black armor on their bodies made a clanking sound, showing their powerful combat power. Black warriors, these should be the Black Warriors. These people were obviously the backbone of the Covenant of Darkness. The dark lich in the sky and the black warriors on the ground seemed to be communicating something. Unfortunately, Chi-Yu could not understand what they were talking about, but he knew that they were confused about his appearance. The spatial crack that the Xianyuan sword had created had already disappeared when Chi-Yu entered this dark world. With the invisibility effect of Kirin's stealth, Chi-Yu was not afraid that these dark creatures would discover him. It was actually a city. This was amazing. The power of darkness was indeed powerful. It could actually use energy to create such a huge space, the space of a city. Even though the scale of the city was small, it was a real existence. The shock lessened Chi-Yu's fear of the Dark Parliament. Now, he was more curious about this place. Chi-Yu was not in a hurry to enter the city. Instead, He used his mind power to carefully probe the energy aura in this place. Through his mind power, he discovered that the energy waves in this dark world were much stronger than those in the outside world. However, the energy here was full of negative energy. Although he could absorb it, it was much more difficult to convert it. After all, filtering out the negative aura would consume a lot of energy, and he could only use 1/10 of it. As a result, the rate of energy absorption here was slower than the outside world. What worried Chi-Yu the most was, there was an indescribable pressure in this dark world, and the source of this pressure was actually the purple sun in the sky. That oppressive feeling prevented him from unleashing his energy to its best state. Chi-Yu thought to himself, even with my strength, I'm greatly affected. If the powerhouses of the Vatican, who are naturally restrained by the dark aura, come to this dark world, I'm afraid they won't be able to pose a real threat to the Dark Parliament. Just like Yamu and Parthenon in this dark world. Whether it was a dark lich or a dark warrior, they would definitely be able to unleash their greatest combat power. While thinking, Chi-Yu had already arrived at the city gate. Right above the gate, there were 3 strange symbols flashing with purple light. Chi-Yu could not understand what they meant, so he hurriedly asked Yamu in the Kirin Pearl. That means Hell City. Chi-Yu. I can't do it anymore. I'm afraid I can't communicate with you here. This place gives me a very uncomfortable feeling. If it wasn't for the fact that I'm in your Kirin Pearl, I think I would have already collapsed. I need to enter a state of cultivation to not be affected by the negative aura. You must be careful. If anything goes wrong, leave immediately. I feel that the negative energy here is very scary. If anything happens, I'm afraid your invisibility skill can't guarantee your safety. Yamu's voice sounded a little weak, even in the Kirin Pearl. She was also a little breathless. Chi-Yu, you rest, I'll be careful. Since I'm already here. If I don't know, the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus King will never leave. This was his promise to Snow Girl. Although Snow Girl was not related to him by blood, Chi-Yu had long regarded Snow Girl as the most important person in his life. Although he didn't promise anything to Snow Girl before coming here, he had already made up his mind to help Snow Girl save her father. Especially after he learned from Klinsmann that the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus King was not dead, his determination was strengthened. Thinking of this, Chi-Yu flew over the suspension bridge and entered the Hell City like a wisp of smoke. At this time, he didn't use his own mental power to explore anything. Instead, he completely restrained his mental power. Chi-Yu was very bold, but he was not careless. Since this world of darkness was so strange, and there was a powerful existence like the Dark Speaker, he didn't want his mental power to cause trouble. After all, in this world of darkness, he was an absolute anomaly. After entering the Hell City, Chi-Yu was immediately attracted by the buildings here. The old European-style spires were arranged in an orderly manner. From afar, he could see that there was a city within the city in the center of the city. The buildings inside were even taller. Obviously, this was the core of the Hell City. He didn't need to guess to know that the place where the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus King was imprisoned must be in this city within the city. The streets of the Hell City were very quiet. Occasionally, a team of black warriors would appear with the clanking of armor. Each team of black warriors was made up of 10 people. The energy that they emitted was extremely powerful, far beyond the werbears and werewolves that Chi-Yu had seen before. The heavy and gloomy aura showed that these black warriors were very powerful. The leader of each team of black warriors had a dark red gem on his chest. He should be the leader of the black warriors. Chi-Yu first quickly walked around the outer city of the Hell City. After careful observation, he found that there were 2 different types of buildings in the outer city. One was pointed and the other was domed. Next to each pointed building were 2 to 3 domed buildings. The pointed buildings were the residences of the Dark Liches, while the domed buildings belonged to the Black Warriors. According to the number of buildings, there were about 2,000 to 3,000 Black Warriors in the Hell City, and about 8,000 to 1,000 Dark Liches. After doing the calculations, Chi-Yu couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. It sounded like there weren't many black warriors and dark liches. However, whether it was the black warriors or the dark liches, they were all extremely powerful existences, especially the negative energy that the dark liches emitted. When a few dark liches were together, even Chi-Yu could feel a suffocating pressure. No wonder they could fight against the Vatican. With such a large number of powerful existences, if they were in the human world outside, it wouldn't be difficult for them to destroy a city. Although the Vatican had many followers, this also caused the Vatican's core strength to be scattered. The Dark Parliament was different. The Dark Liches and Black Warriors were all gathered here. When it was time to move, they would definitely be a terrifying force. After a simple observation, Chi-Yu finally decided to sneak into the inner city of the Hell City. When he arrived at the edge of the inner city, he discovered that the purple sun was actually floating right above the inner city. With a thought, he vaguely understood that this purple sun was probably the energy core of this dark world of Hell City. It was hard to imagine how it was created, but he knew that without this purple sun, this dark world would no longer exist. Chi-Yu became even more careful when he reached the inner city of Hell City. Ever since he entered the dark world, he found that his 4 types of thundercloud force had been greatly weakened, no matter which type of thundercloud force he used. They were unable to display more than 50% of their strength. In this place filled with a large amount of negative energy, only dark energy could receive the greatest amplification, while other types of energy could only be weakened. Fortunately, he still had Kirin's origin power. The energy that came from the bloodline was not affected by the negative aura. Therefore, Chi-Yu could only transform his thundercloud force into origin power. He carefully condensed it. This was also the reason why he was not in a hurry to enter the inner city. He had to first condense and transform his energy so that he could deal with any changes that might occur. The inner city of Hell City was not that easy to enter. The city tower was 10 meters taller than the outer city, reaching a height of 30 meters. On the city tower, every 20 meters, there was a black warrior with a giant sword in his hands guarding. This was not the most troublesome thing. What made Chi-Yu the most depressed was the layer of light purple light barrier above the inner city. He had just tested it, and the layer of light purple light barrier could not even be penetrated by his spiritual power. The energy fluctuation was very strong, very similar to the energy of the purple sun in the sky. Domain. Chi-Yu immediately determined the attribute of the purple light barrier. It was definitely a domain, at least a defensive one. As for what other characteristics it had, he would probably only understand when he experienced it. It was not difficult to enter this domain. As long as he relied on the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword, any defensive domain could be broken, at least temporarily. Just like when he entered this world of darkness, using the Xianyuan sword, he could also enter the inner city. However, at that time, his traces would inevitably be exposed. If the invisibility effect disappeared in the domain of the inner city, then, not to mention finding the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus King, even he would immediately become the target of public criticism. This was the problem that Chi-Yu was worried about. What to do? Chi-Yu secretly asked himself, do I really have to use the Xianyuan sword? No, there must be some other way. His brain was working at high speed. While carefully observing the characteristics of the purple domain, he secretly thought about which of his various abilities was the most suitable to use at this time. After a short screening process, Chi-Yu locked on to the 1,000 opportunities and 100 changes. At this time, besides the Xianyuan sword, only the 1,000 opportunities and 100 changes could send him into the inner city. Domain against domain, although the possibility of success was lower than the Xianyuan sword, the possibility of concealing himself was much higher. Thinking of this, Chi-Yu no longer hesitated. He knew that the longer he stayed in this world of darkness, the more disadvantageous it would be. Although the negative energy did not have a great impact on his spirit, it more or less penetrated his energy. If he stayed here for a long time, he did not know what problems would arise. Hiding in a dark corner where the purple sunlight could not reach, Chi Yu quietly removed the invisibility ability, but still restrained his aura. The 1,000 opportunities and 100 changes. Quietly activated the 1,000 opportunities and 100 changes, and a dark red light enveloped his whole body. Chi Yu completely injected his origin energy into the 1,000 opportunities and 100 changes, took a deep breath, and released 2 strong silver rays of light from his eyes. The dark red light flashed for a moment, and in the next moment, his body had already disappeared. Teleportation, this was Chi Yu's choice. Moreover, he used teleportation with all his strength. Teleportation was actually a special ability to break through space in an instant, and under the control of mental strength, send one's body to any point within a certain range. However, this was the first time he had used such a method to send himself to a place that even mental strength could not reach. Although the eyes could not see after entering the state of teleportation, the feeling was still there. When passing through the purple domain, Chi Yu clearly felt as if his body was wrapped in some kind of mucus, and everything became sluggish. At this time, a sharp aura was automatically released from his body, and forcibly broke through the mucus and rushed in. After all, teleportation without the guidance of mental strength was too difficult. At the crucial moment, it was still the aura of the Xianyuan sword that played a crucial role, and in the end, he still succeeded. Compared to using the Xianyuan sword to break through the domain, teleportation was much more secretive, and at least it did not have that dazzling golden light. As soon as he realized that he had entered the inner city, in the next moment, Chi Yu immediately activated his invisibility technique, and quietly retreated to a corner of the inner city. However, although it was only for a moment, the moment he became invisible, dozens of eyes still focused on him. Fortunately, Chi Yu's movements were fast, and he did not arouse the suspicions of those black warriors. He let out a long breath, and the soul-stirring feeling made Chi Yu feel exceptionally excited. Ever since Kirin had achieved great success and returned to the modern world, this was the first time he had felt so much pressure. The energy aura of the inner city was different from that of the outer city. The negative aura here was much less than that of the outer city, and it was almost negligible. However, the energy waves were indeed 3 times that of the outer city. After careful investigation, Chi Yu found that the strong energy waves here were actually pure dark energy. Could dark energy also be pure? The truth was right in front of him, and he had no choice but to believe it. Quietly squatting on the ground, Chi Yu gathered strength in his right hand, and Kirin's arm, which carried the energy of Kirin's origin, silently inserted into the hard black ground. Closing his eyes, the energy of the origin of nature condensed into a drop of green liquid, and seeped out from the middle finger of his right hand. Although it was difficult for the energy of the origin of nature to spread in this world full of death and dark energy, under the circumstances that Chi Yu's origin of nature was the foundation, it slowly spread through the ground in the direction that he wanted. Hell City was so big, and he didn't know what kind of hidden traps and special dark areas were hidden, so it was easier said than done to find the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus King. Before coming here, he had already thought of a way, otherwise, he wouldn't have taken the risk so easily. The Emperor Heart Snow Lotus King was a special plant of the level of heaven and earth, and it was impossible to completely cover its plant aura with anything. Rather than aimlessly searching and risking being discovered, it was far better to rely on the aura of the origin of nature to determine his location. Although he didn't expect the dark energy here to be so abundant, the method that Chi Yu chose was still the most correct. As the range of the origin of nature's energy gradually increased, Chi Yu also gradually began to feel the strain. The huge amount of dark energy had become a strong barrier, and the range of the origin of nature's energy was also becoming larger and larger. This caused Chi Yu's consumption of energy to increase exponentially, and even though he was the origin of nature, he was already somewhat unable to bear it. Just as Chi Yu was preparing to maintain the current area of exploration and change to another place to search, suddenly, the natural energy that he had scattered underground moved slightly, and a fresh energy aura came into contact with his natural energy. Although it was very weak, in this place that was full of dark energy, he could still clearly feel its uniqueness. This discovery couldn't help but make Chi Yu very happy. He hurriedly gathered the natural energy that he had scattered in other directions, and specifically concentrated in this direction to search. After concentrating, the natural energy immediately became stronger, and under the guidance of the aura, he finally found the location of the aura that was similar to his own. The fresh natural energy brought a very comfortable feeling to Chi Yu, but there seemed to be some kind of barrier around the natural energy, preventing his natural energy from truly coming into contact with the fragrance. But this was enough. In this world of darkness, what else could this kind of energy aura be? Moreover, it was such a pure natural energy. Chi Yu used his natural energy to send a friendly and kind aura to the other party, even though they could not truly communicate. Although there was no real communication through the contact between their auras, he still let the other party feel the purpose of his trip. After a brief contact, Chi Yu quickly determined the other party's location, quietly withdrew his own natural energy, simply adjusted his own aura, floated up, and quickly flew in that direction. In the inner city of Hell City, it was mainly made up of more than 10 pointed buildings. These pointed buildings were all built with special dark red stones. In the center of the inner city, this was the largest spires. The entire building was about 15 meters high. It covered an area of thousands of square meters, and the spires of this building faced the distant purple sun in the sky. A huge amount of dark energy connected it to the purple sun, forming a bridge of energy. Needless to ask, Chi Yu knew that this must be the place where the Dark Chairman lived. On both sides of this spires, there were also subsidiary spires, about 5 meters shorter than the central spires, and the area they occupied was only half of the central spires. And the natural energy aura that Chi Yu discovered was in the subsidiary spires on the left. More accurately, it was in the underground of the subsidiary spires. This was one of the reasons why he could so smoothly discover the natural energy aura. Smiling slightly, Chi Yu's eyes revealed a strong cold light. He took a deep breath, adjusted his energy to the peak, and carefully touched the side of the subsidiary spires. Each of the 3 spires had an arched door, and on each side of the door was a black warrior guardian. Different from the black warriors he had seen before, the black warriors guarding here were 3 meters tall, and although the armor on their bodies was still black, the gemstones inlaid in front of their chests were dark green, and the size of the gemstones was much larger than the gemstones of the black warrior captains. Inlaid in front of their chests, it looked like a breastplate. The strength of these black warriors must be even stronger. This was the judgment that immediately appeared in Chi Yu's mind. At the same time, he also discovered that the 3 connected spires contained a huge amount of dark energy. The purple sun in the sky was like its protective umbrella, constantly providing a huge amount of energy aura. After a simple scan of the defensive energy here, Chi Yu immediately determined that it would be impossible to rely on teleportation to get in. Otherwise, if he failed, he was afraid that he would be injured by the huge amount of dark energy. After all, his body was relatively weak when he used instant teleportation. This time, Chi Yu did not hesitate at all, nor did he consider other methods, and directly walked towards the subsidiary spires. He landed lightly on the spires, took a deep breath, and the explosive source energy of Kirin quickly condensed in his body. Due to the existence of the source of nature, his own energy itself was already very condensed, and at this time, under his deliberate effort, the intensity of the energy suddenly became stronger. Invisibility could only be maintained when he was not attacking or when he was in the 1000 transformation Big Dipper realm technique. The moment Chi Yu accumulated energy to its peak, he swung his right fist. Kirin's arm appeared, and at this moment, it displayed an extremely tyrannical attack power. It suddenly appeared, condensed all of its energy, and instantly bombarded a green crystal black warrior from the side. The reaction of the black warrior was much faster than Chi Yu had imagined. When it suddenly felt a huge amount of energy appear, it immediately made the most correct judgment. It crossed its arms in front of its chest, gave up the huge sword in its hand, and blocked the attack of Chi Yu's Kirin's arm. However, could it block a direct attack of Kirin's arm with its arms? Perhaps this situation had only happened to the Bull Demon King back then. Even powerful existences like Yamu or the Chaos King would not dare to let Kirin's arm hit their bodies at close range. There was a loud bang, and the crisp sound of metal shattering and bones breaking could be heard. Under the full force of Chi Yu's attack, the body of the green crystal black warrior instantly crashed into the body of the other green crystal black warrior. The speed of the attack was extremely terrifying. When Chi Yu's right fist separated from the body of the green crystal black warrior, he already knew that the green crystal black warrior was finished. The green crystal black warrior that was sent flying by Chi Yu's attack was actually cut in half from the middle. His body was split into 2 halves by his comrade. However, although its armor and bones were shattered by the attack of Kirin's arm, its body was still mixed with the remaining energy of Kirin's arm. The green crystal black warrior that cut its comrade in half let out a muffled groan. Its 3-meter-tall body staggered backward. It left deep footprints on the ground. Chi Yu's body, which had already revealed itself, shot out like an arrow. His target was the largest appraisal building in the center. The 4 green crystal black warriors that were guarding the other 2 buildings charged towards Chi Yu's body at an unbelievable speed. Even the injured green crystal dark warrior disregarded his own injuries and brandished the heavy sword in his hand, sending out a black ray of light towards Chi Yu's body. However, none of them noticed that the door of the spire building had opened slightly, revealing a small gap. Then it disappeared. Chi Yu, who was surrounded by 5 green crystal black warriors, changed the direction of his attack and flew out of the city at lightning speed. Following a deep and cold roar, 2 of the green crystal black warriors suddenly split up and chased after him. They could not fly, but they could jump at an astonishing speed. At the same time, dozens of clouds of black mist surrounded Chi Yu's body. What happened to Chi Yu? At this time, his real body had already entered the attached building. It turned out that the moment he launched the Qilin arm attack, he had also activated the 1000 opportunities and 100 changes of the 4 stars realm. At the same time, the mimicry ability allowed him to imitate another version of himself and pounce toward the pointed building in the center, attracting the attention of all the green crystal dark warriors. At the same time, his real body flew out of the building and became invisible again. He used that brief moment to sneak into his destination. Chi Yu knew that he didn't have much time left. Under the combined attacks of the Dark Warriors and Dark Lich, his camouflage ability would quickly shatter. The other party could come looking for him at any time. Although he could turn invisible, he had already been exposed. Inside the attached building was a dark hall. It was empty, but there was a purple skull floating in the air. The skull was about 1 meter in diameter, and it gave people a sense of fear when they saw it. Around the skull, there was a circle of special purple symbols rotating slightly. The air in the hall seemed to be viscous, and the air here was made up of extremely condensed dark energy. Oh my God! How did such dense dark energy particles form? Chi Yu's mind was full of questions. If a dark creature trained in this place, it would probably be able to create a strong person in a short period of time. It was hard to imagine. However, this was not the time to be amazed. He did not lose himself in the momentary surprise. He gathered his mental strength and helped the original energy of Kirin to resist the invasion of the dark energy. Following the guidance of the source of nature, he quickly arrived at the inner part of the hall. Because the air here was too sticky, the vision of the dark energy was blocked. It was not until he reached the innermost part of the hall that Chi-Yu saw a special statue. The statue looked very strange. It had 4 pairs of black wings, and its body was completely black. It was a man with long gray hair draped over his back. His eyes were dark purple. His eyes seemed to have some kind of magic power. As soon as Chi-Yu saw it, he immediately felt a chill run down his body. Even his invisible state disappeared automatically when he saw the statue. A feeling of being restricted invaded his body. At the same time, there seemed to be a low voice constantly ringing in his heart. It seemed to be saying something, but when he listened carefully, he could not hear anything. Resisting the discomfort in his body, Chi-Yu stretched out his hand to push the statue. Because the natural aura he sensed came from under the statue, there must be an entrance here. The moment his hand came into contact with the statue, an incomparably surging dark energy surged forth and shook Chi-Yu's hand away. Immediately after, a purple hexagram suddenly appeared beneath the statue's feet, and the dark energy in the entire hall suddenly paused for a moment. Following a series of creaking sounds, the statue and the floor beneath it slowly moved to the side, revealing a deep passageway. Chi-Yu did not even have the time to hesitate as he quickly leapt in. The stairs spiraled downwards, and the moment he descended, the statue above had already returned to its original position. The aura of darkness energy was still as vast as ever. After descending for about 20 meters, the spiral staircase reached the bottom. It was a room. When Chi-Yu entered, his eyes immediately froze. The room was not big, about 20 square meters. In the middle of the room, a woman was suspended in the air. Her body was completely naked, and her white skin looked very attractive. Both her hands and feet were bound by dark red chains, hanging in the air in the shape of the character. Her delicate body was overflowing with beauty, and she was completely exposed to Chi-Yu. Her white skin was like a milky white crystal, and her long golden hair hung down to her hip. She was about the same height as Ryuit. Her figure was so perfect. Her slender legs were split open, and her lower body was actually smooth, without a trace of hair covering it. Her pink lower body looked full of childishness. Her chest was unusually full, but it was extremely straight, without the slightest drooping, outlining 2 perfect arcs.